You found the Stealth Podcast. Tonight, we'll travel through dark and lonely stories. Where in the world are you watching from? What time is it there? Subscribe and leave your like to support us. Let's begin. My name is Elijah Mercer, 34 years old, and I live in Chicago. City life had worn me down after a decade of grinding away at a marketing firm that didn't appreciate me. That's why I took the plunge 6 months ago and converted an old Ford Transit into my new home. Freedom on wheels, that's what everyone in the Vanlife forums kept calling it. They weren't wrong, but they never mentioned the darker sides of living on the road. The open highways of the Midwest had been my salvation these past few months. Something about the endless cornfields and small towns scattered across the landscape made me feel at peace. I'd been making my way through Illinois, Wisconsin, and now I was heading into Iowa, documenting my journey for my modest but growing YouTube channel. I'd made a point to avoid tourist traps, instead seeking out those hidden gems that only locals knew about. That's how I ended up in Blackwood Creek, a tiny speck on the map in eastern Iowa. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and strangers stick out like a sore thumb. I could feel eyes on me the moment I pulled my van into the local diner's parking lot. But that wasn't unusual. My van, with its solar panels and slightly hippie exterior paint job, tended to draw attention in conservative areas. Just passing through, the waitress asked as she poured my coffee. Her name tag read Doris, and deep lines creased her weathered face. Something in her tone suggested she hoped the answer was yes. Thinking of staying a few days, I replied, sipping the surprisingly good coffee. Heard there's some beautiful hiking trails near the old limestone quarry. Thought I'd check them out. Doris's hand trembled slightly, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of my mug. The quarry's private property now. Has been for years. Wouldn't recommend it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The Henderson family bought it after what happened back in '97. My interest peaked immediately. As a content creator, I knew a good story when I smelled one. What happened in '97? The diner had grown quieter, and I realized several locals were listening to our conversation. An older man at the counter shook his head and returned to his breakfast. Doris straightened up and plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing worth mentioning, she said brightly. Just an unfortunate accident. So, what do you have for breakfast? I ordered eggs and bacon, but my mind was racing. There was clearly a story here, and the journalist in me couldn't resist digging deeper. Little did I know that my curiosity would lead me down a path I'd regret. If I had just heeded the subtle warnings, the terror that followed might have been avoided entirely. After breakfast, I decided to drive around town to get a feel for the place. Blackwood Creek had that eerie small-town charm. Picture perfect on the surface, but with an undercurrent of something unsettling. As I approached the outskirts where the old quarry was supposed to be, I noticed the road was blocked by a massive wrought iron gate with a sign that read, Henderson Property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. That night, I parked my van in a clearing about half a mile from the Henderson property. It was quiet, too quiet, without the usual symphony of crickets and night creatures I'd grown accustomed to. I told myself it was just the unfamiliar surroundings making me jumpy as I settled in to edit footage for my channel. Around midnight, a sharp knock on my van door nearly gave me a heart attack. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, my hands trembled as I clutched the baseball bat I kept for protection and peered through the small window. A young woman stood outside, her face pale in the moonlight. Not threatening, but definitely distressed. Hello. I called through the door, keeping it locked. Can I help you? Please, she said, her voice shaking. I need to use a phone. My car broke down on the road back there, and there's no cell service. She looked over her shoulder nervously. I'm not supposed to be here. None of us are. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. The woman, who introduced herself as Maya, seemed genuinely frightened. As I handed her my satellite phone, I noticed deep scratches on her forearms. When she caught me looking, she quickly pulled down her sleeves. The Henderson family doesn't like trespassers, she explained while dialing. They're protective of their land since what happened. What exactly did happen? I pressed, hoping to finally get some answers. Maya lowered the phone, her call apparently finished. You really don't know? The quarry used to be a town attraction until the Henderson boys found something in the deepest part. Something that shouldn't have been disturbed. She shivered despite the warm night. People went missing after that. The official story was that they drowned, but a distant engine sound cut her off. Headlights swept through the trees, and Maya's face contorted with fear. "They're coming. You need to leave. Now." She shoved the phone back at me and bolted into the darkness. I didn't waste time. Something about her terror felt legitimate. I jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine just as a pickup truck emerged from the trees. Its high beams blinded me momentarily, and I could make out 3 silhouettes inside. Driving through unfamiliar woods at night wasn't my smartest move, but fear is a powerful motivator. I followed what seemed to be a service road, my headlights bouncing off dense foliage. The pickup followed at a distance, not aggressive but undeniably tracking me. When I finally reached the main road, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and watched as the pickup cruised slowly past, the driver making deliberate eye contact. A silent warning. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I filled my tank, and the attendant, a teenage boy with tired eyes, seemed unusually interested in my van. "Nice setup," he commented. "Staying around here long?" "Just passing through," I replied, deciding Blackwood Creek's secrets weren't worth the obvious danger. "Shame. We don't get many visitors these days." He handed me my change with a strange smile. "Not since the Henderson family took over the quarry. They don't like outsiders much, especially ones with cameras." I froze. I hadn't mentioned anything about cameras or my YouTube channel. "How did you?" "Small town," he shrugged. "Word travels fast. But if you're really interested in the quarry, there's an old access road the Hendersons don't watch too closely, behind the abandoned mill. Just be careful what you film out there. Some things aren't meant to be seen." I should have left town immediately. Any sane person would have. But there's something about forbidden knowledge that pulls at the human psyche, like a scab you know you shouldn't pick but can't resist. The next morning, I found myself driving toward the abandoned mill, curiosity overpowering my fear. The mill stood like a decaying giant against the cloudless Iowa sky, its wooden skeleton barely holding together after decades of neglect. Behind it, just as the gas station attendant had said, a narrow dirt path wound into the woods. No gate, no warning signs. It seemed too easy. I parked my van behind the mill to keep it hidden from the main road and continued on foot, camera in hand. The path grew narrower as I walked, branches scratching at my arms like skeletal fingers trying to hold me back. After about 20 minutes, I caught my first glimpse of the quarry, a massive crater in the earth filled with unnaturally blue water. The quarry walls rose nearly vertical, creating a perfect bowl of limestone with a single path spiraling down to the water's edge. I began my descent carefully, filming as I went. The quiet was oppressive. Not even birds dared sing here. About halfway down, I noticed something odd, markings carved into the stone wall. Not graffiti, but deliberate symbols that reminded me of ancient ruins. As I reached the water's edge, my stomach clenched with instinctive dread. The water was clear, too clear, revealing what appeared to be structures beneath the surface. Not natural formations, but straight lines and perfect angles. Buildings of some kind, submerged when the quarry was flooded. I knelt to get a better shot with my camera when a voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. "You shouldn't be here, city boy." The man was tall and gaunt, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that reflected the quarry's unnatural blue. "This ain't a tourist attraction. I'm just taking some footage for personal use," I lied, slowly backing away. Didn't see any no trespassing signs. The man, who I assumed was one of the Hendersons, smiled without humor. "Don't need signs when everyone knows to stay away." He gestured to my camera. "That'll have to stay here." "Excuse me. Your camera. It stays. Or you do." His hand moved to his belt, revealing the handle of a hunting knife. "Your choice." Before I could respond, shouts echoed from above. 2 more men appeared at the quarry's edge, pointing down at us. The first man's expression changed from threatening to fearful. "They're early," he muttered, then grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Run." Now, confused but terrified, I ran alongside him along the water's edge. "What's happening?" I gasped. "They've started the ritual early. Must have sensed an outsider." He pulled me toward a small opening in the quarry wall, a cave entrance I hadn't noticed before. "In here. It's our only chance." The cave mouth swallowed us, just as inhuman screams erupted behind us. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The men at the quarry's edge were no longer men at all. their bodies contorting and elongating in ways that defied anatomy, skin splitting to reveal something else beneath. My reluctant savior pushed me deeper into the darkness. Keep moving. They can smell your fear. The cave narrowed to a tight tunnel that forced us to crawl. Behind us, scraping sounds and those terrible screams grew closer. My elbows and knees bled from sharp rocks as I desperately scrambled forward. The tunnel seemed endless, the darkness absolute except for the weak beam of my phone flashlight. What are those things? I gasped, my voice echoing eerily. Henderson's, he replied grimly. What's left of them, anyway? They found something in the quarry years ago. Something old. It changed them. He paused, listening to the sounds behind us. They need fresh blood to keep it contained. That's why they don't like visitors. The tunnel suddenly opened into a larger chamber illuminated by an eerie blue glow, the same unnatural color as the quarry water. In the center stood what appeared to be an altar, ancient and covered in the same symbols I'd seen carved into the quarry walls. "Oh God," I whispered, as my light revealed dark stains covering the stone floor. "Those missing people. Sacrifices," he confirmed. "Every month when the moon is right. But they must be desperate if they're hunting during daylight." He moved toward another tunnel on the far side of the chamber. "This way leads to the old mine system. If we hurry, we might reach town before nightfall." As we crossed the chamber, my foot struck something that rolled across the stone floor with a hollow sound. I pointed my light at it and immediately regretted it. A human skull, its top cleanly removed as if it had been used as a vessel. The old mine tunnels stretched beneath Blackwood Creek like a spider's web, dark and disorienting. My companion, who finally introduced himself as Levi, a former Henderson who'd escaped the family's madness, navigated the darkness with practiced ease. I stumbled behind him, the horrors we'd witnessed replaying in my mind. They weren't always monsters, Levi explained as we moved deeper into the earth. The Henderson family founded this town, ran the quarry for generations. Good people once. His voice cracked with emotion. Until my father and uncles uncovered that chamber during an expansion dig, found artifacts, tablets with symbols, and a sealed container. What was in it? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Something old. Something that shouldn't exist on this earth. It offered them power, immortality. He paused at a junction, considering our path. But power always comes with a price. A distant howl echoed through the tunnels, sending chills down my spine. Levi's face drained of color. They've picked up our scent. We need to move faster. We broke into a run, no longer caring about noise. The tunnels began sloping upward, a good sign we were nearing the surface. My lungs burned, muscles screamed in protest, but fear kept me moving. Behind us, inhuman sounds grew closer, skittering movements and ragged breathing that didn't sound like anything natural. There, Levi pointed ahead to a faint light source. Storm drain that empties near the creek. Once we're out, we have to reach your van. As we neared the exit, a terrible screeching sound filled the tunnel, so loud it felt like my eardrums might rupture. Levi pulled me into a small alcove just as something massive moved past us in the darkness. Something that dragged itself along the walls and ceiling rather than walking. "Don't move," Levi whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "It's blind but can sense movement." I froze, not even daring to breathe as the creature paused just feet away. In the dim light filtering from ahead, I caught glimpses of pale, slick skin stretched over an emaciated frame, limbs bent at impossible angles. Its head swiveled unnaturally, mouth opening to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. For what felt like eternity, we remained still as statues. Finally, the creature moved on, continuing deeper into the tunnels. When its sounds faded, Levi nudged me forward. "Now, run and don't look back." We burst from the storm drain into the fading daylight of late afternoon. The drain emptied into a shallow creek bed not far from the abandoned mill where I'd left my van. Without pausing for breath, we sprinted through the woods, branches whipping our faces. A shrill alarm suddenly cut through the air, not electronic, but a sound made by human throats pushed beyond their limits. Answering calls echoed from different directions. They were coordinating, hunting us like pack animals. "They've called the others," Levi gasped as we ran. "The whole family will be coming." When the mill finally came into view, relief flooded through me. until I saw the figures surrounding my van. 3 men and a woman, all with the same unnatural stillness, the same wrong proportions to their limbs. Not fully transformed like the creature in the tunnel, but well on their way. "We're trapped," I whispered, ducking behind a fallen tree. Levi's eyes darted around desperately. "There's another way. Old caretaker's cottage about half a mile east. Has a truck. Keys always in the ignition." He gripped my shoulder. "But we'll have to split up. Give me your jacket." I handed it over, understanding his plan. He would create a diversion while I made for the cottage. The likelihood of both of us surviving seemed slim, but it was our only chance. "Why are you helping me?" I asked as he prepared to run. "Because someone needs to tell the truth. About this town. About what my family became." He pulled out a small object from his pocket, a USB drive, and pressed it into my palm. "Everything's on here. What they found, what it did to them, what they've been doing to keep it contained. If I don't make it, make sure this gets out." Before I could respond, he was gone, crashing through the underbrush away from both the mill and the cottage. The effect was immediate. The figures by my van jerked their heads in unison, then moved with frightening speed after the sound, after my scent on Levi's borrowed jacket. I waited until they disappeared into the trees, then ran east toward my only hope of escape. The caretaker's cottage appeared through the trees just as twilight descended, a small, dilapidated structure that looked like it hadn't been occupied in decades. True to Levi's word, a rusted pickup truck sat in the overgrown driveway. My hands trembled so badly I could barely get the door open, relief washing over me when I found the keys in the ignition as promised. The engine coughed reluctantly to life, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness as I backed out and pointed the truck toward what I hoped was the main road. The USB drive Levi had given me felt heavy in my pocket, a burden of terrible knowledge I wasn't sure I wanted. I made it about 2 miles before the truck's engine sputtered and died, the fuel gauge revealing the tank was empty. Panic surged through me as I coasted to a stop in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense woods on both sides. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even insects dared make noise. With no other options, I began walking, using my phone's flashlight to illuminate the road ahead. Every shadow seemed to move. Every breeze through the trees sounded like whispers. I tried not to think about Levi, about what might have happened when the Hendersons realized they'd been tricked. After what felt like hours, lights appeared in the distance, the outskirts of Blackwood Creek. I should have been relieved, but something felt wrong. The streets were empty, houses dark except for single candles burning in every window. As I moved through the silent town, I noticed symbols chalked on doorways, the same symbols from the quarry walls and the underground altar. The gas station where I'd stopped the previous night glowed like a beacon of normalcy ahead. I broke into a run, desperate for help, for human contact that wasn't tainted by whatever madness had infected this place. The teenage attendant looked up in surprise when I burst through the door, wild-eyed and covered in dirt and blood. "Hey, Van Guy. Didn't expect to see you again." His casual tone felt surreal after what I'd experienced. "Please," I gasped. "I need to use your phone. Need to call the police." His expression changed, not to fear or concern, but to something like pity. "No police in Blackwood Creek. Not anymore." He reached under the counter. "But don't worry, the Hendersons will take good care of you." Too late, I realized my mistake. The symbols I'd seen on the doorways weren't protection, they were participation. The entire town was complicit. I turned to flee but found the doorway blocked by 3 figures, the same ones who had been at my van. Up close, their wrongness was even more apparent. Skin stretched too tight over elongated bones, joints that bent in extra places, eyes with vertical pupils like a cat's. "You've led us on quite a chase," said the woman, her voice overlapping with itself as if multiple people were speaking from one throat. "But tonight's ceremony requires fresh blood." The walls between worlds grow thin. They move toward me with that unnatural grace, backing me against the counter. I frantically searched for a weapon, anything to defend myself. My hand closed around a plastic lighter. The gas station. Gasoline. With one desperate move, I grabbed the gallon of kerosene meant for camp stoves displayed by the register and smashed it on the floor between us. Before they could react, I flicked the lighter and dropped it. The flames erupted instantly, creating a barrier between me and the creatures. They shrieked, not in pain but in rage, as I bolted for the back exit. The teenager lunged for me, but was too slow. Outside, I ran blindly into the night, the gas station erupting into a fireball behind me. The town's silence was broken by that inhuman alarm call I'd heard in the woods, answered from all directions. The entire town, every man, woman, and child, was part of this. I found myself back on the main road, lungs burning, no destination in mind except away. Headlights appeared around a bend ahead. I waved frantically, ready to take my chances with whoever was driving. The SUV slowed as it approached. The driver's window rolled down to reveal Maya, the woman from my first night who had asked to use my phone. "Get in," she said urgently. Quickly, I didn't hesitate, throwing myself into the passenger seat. As we accelerated away from Blackwood Creek, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "I thought you were one of them," I admitted. Maya kept her eyes on the road. I was. Once. Like Levi, I got out before the transformation was complete. She glanced at me. "Did he give you the drive?" I nodded, pulling it from my pocket. "Good. There are others like us in Des Moines. People who escaped, who know the truth." She grimaced. "But we're running out of time. What's in the quarry is growing stronger. Soon, the Hendersons won't be content to stay in Blackwood Creek." As we drove through the night, putting distance between us and that cursed town, I plugged the USB drive into the car's computer. Images flashed across the screen, the submerged structures I'd seen in the quarry, the altar, and something else. Something partially excavated from the limestone. An object that looked both organic and mechanical, covered in the same symbols, pulsing with that unnatural blue light. "What is it?" I whispered. Maya's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "We don't know exactly, but it's old. Older than human civilization. And it's hungry." In the rearview mirror, an orange glow illuminated the horizon. The gas station fire had spread to the surrounding buildings. Blackwood Creek was burning, but somehow, I knew that wouldn't be enough to destroy what lurked beneath it. I checked my phone, surprised to find I had signal again. Dozens of notifications flooded in, comments on my YouTube channel from followers wondering why I'd stopped posting. The normal world still existed out there, blissfully unaware of places like Blackwood Creek and families like the Hendersons. "They'll rebuild," Maya said, reading my thoughts. "They always do. But next time, we'll be ready." As we crossed the county line, I felt something I hadn't expected, not relief, but responsibility. The USB drive contained the truth, and now that truth was mine to bear. Somewhere behind us, Levi had likely sacrificed himself to give me this chance. I wouldn't waste it. The Vanlife dream that had brought me to Iowa was over. I had a new purpose now, one that would take me to other small towns with dark secrets, other places where things that shouldn't exist had broken through into our world. My camera would become my weapon, documentation my shield. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain. But for the first time since fleeing the quarry, I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward it. My name is Violet Harlow, 28 years old, and I call Portland home. Or at least I did until 3 months ago when I traded my overpriced studio apartment for a refurbished 1978 Volkswagen bus. The corporate rat race had crushed my spirit and drained my creativity, so I decided to pursue my passion for documentary photography on the road. My Instagram following was modest but growing, mostly fellow wanderers and dreamers appreciating my snapshots of America's forgotten corners. Iowa wasn't originally on my itinerary. I was heading for the Badlands when my transmission started making troubling noises somewhere east of Des Moines. The mechanic in the small town of Wilson's Junction said parts would take at least 4 days to arrive, leaving me stranded in a place that barely registered on the map. With my bus in the shop, I decided to rent a car and explore the surrounding areas rather than waste away in the town's only motel. That's how I discovered Blackwood Creek. The name caught my eye on a weathered signpost along a winding country road, the kind of place photographers dream about. Remote, untouched, potentially full of character and stories. The GPS showed it was only about 30 miles from Wilson's Junction, so I decided to make a day trip of it. The town itself was smaller than I expected, maybe a few hundred residents at most. Main Street consisted of a general store, a diner, a small library, and a handful of other buildings, many with boarded windows. What struck me immediately was how everyone stopped to stare as I drove through. Not the casual curiosity you might expect in a small town, but intense, evaluating stares that made my skin crawl. I parked near the diner, figuring I could grab lunch and maybe chat with locals about any interesting spots to photograph. The bell above the door announced my arrival, and the hushed conversations inside died immediately. Every pair of eyes turned to me, studied me for an uncomfortable moment, then deliberately returned to their meals or conversations. "Take any seat," a waitress called out, her voice friendly enough but her eyes cold. Her name tag read Bethany, and she looked to be in her 50s, with prematurely graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. I chose a booth by the window, partly to keep an eye on my rental car, an irrational paranoia that had crept over me since entering town. Bethany brought me a menu and water without asking, then hovered nearby as I perused the limited options. "Just passing through?" she asked, the same question I'd heard in dozens of small towns. "Sort of. My van broke down in Wilson's Junction, so I'm exploring while I wait for repairs," I explained, trying to sound casual. "I'm a photographer. Thought this area might have some interesting landscapes to capture." Something flickered across her face. Concern? Warning? It disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "Not much to see around here," she said flatly. "Just farmland and the old reservoir. Nothing worth photographing." Her dismissiveness only piqued my interest further. In my experience, locals who insisted there was nothing to see were often hiding the most interesting spots, either to protect them from tourists or because they'd become blind to the beauty of their own surroundings. "The reservoir?" I asked, feigning mild interest while ordering a BLT sandwich. Bethany's pen paused over her notepad. "It's off limits. Private property since the flood back in '08. The Nash family owns it now." She lowered her voice. "They don't take kindly to trespassers, especially ones with cameras." As she walked away, I noticed a young man at the counter watching our interaction. Unlike the others, his gaze held curiosity rather than suspicion. When our eyes met, he offered a small smile before quickly looking down at his coffee. Something told me he might be more forthcoming than Bethany. I finished my lunch and approached the young man at the counter, sliding onto the stool beside him. Up close, he looked around my age, maybe slightly younger, with the weathered hands of someone who worked outside but intelligent eyes that suggested he wasn't just a farmhand. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm Violet. Just visiting for the day." "Owen," he replied, glancing nervously toward the kitchen where Bethany had disappeared. "You really shouldn't have come here. Not alone." His bluntness caught me off guard. "Why is that?" Owen sighed, pushing his empty coffee cup away. "Blackwood Creek isn't like other towns. We have traditions, ways of doing things that outsiders don't understand." He checked his watch. "You should leave before sunset. The roads get confusing in the dark." Something in his tone, urgency masked as casual advice, made me take him seriously. Still, my journalist instincts were firing on all cylinders. There was a story here, perhaps the kind that could launch my documentary career beyond Instagram posts. "What about the reservoir? I heard it might be worth seeing." I kept my voice casual, testing his reaction. Owen's face drained of color. "Who told you about that?" "The waitress mentioned it was off limits. And you should listen to her," he said firmly. "The Nash property is dangerous. The water's contaminated from the old factory runoff. That's why they bought it, to keep people safe." He was lying. Not about the danger, perhaps, but definitely about the contamination. His eyes darted away when he mentioned it, a classic tell. Before I could press further, the bell above the door jingled. Owen visibly tensed as three men entered. Large, imposing figures in work clothes with identical blank expressions. The lead man nodded to Owen, a gesture that seemed more command than greeting. "I've got to go," Owen muttered, sliding a napkin toward me as he stood. "Be careful, Violet." As he left with the men, I glanced down at the napkin. Scrawled hastily across it was, 1.5 miles north of town, dirt road by red mailbox. "Come after dark if you want the truth. Tell no one." I tucked the napkin into my pocket, paid my bill, and left the diner feeling both excited and unsettled. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street. I had several hours to kill before nightfall, so I decided to drive around the outskirts of town, staying within cell service range, which had become mysteriously spotty since arriving in Blackwood Creek. As I explored, I noticed strange symbols painted on fence posts and barn doors. Circular designs with intricate patterns that didn't resemble any religious or cultural symbols I recognized. Some looked freshly painted, others weathered by years of exposure. I photographed several, zooming in with my telephoto lens to avoid trespassing. Around 4 o'clock, I found myself on a narrow road that seemed to lead toward what must be the reservoir. A large sign warned, "Nash property, and no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." But beyond it, I could see the shimmer of water through the trees. Something about the place felt wrong. The birds were silent, no insects buzzed, as if nature itself avoided the area. I was about to turn back when a figure emerged from the tree line ahead, a woman in a dirty white dress, her hair wild and matted. She stumbled toward my car with an uneven gait, one arm extended in a plea for help. My first instinct was to stop, but something held me back, the unnatural stillness of her face, perhaps, or the way she moved like a marionette with tangled strings. I accelerated past her, heart pounding. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the middle of the road, head tilted at an impossible angle as she watched my car disappear around the bend. Only then did I realize she'd been completely dry, despite having supposedly come from the direction of the water. By the time I returned to town, the streets were emptying as businesses closed early. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting everything in amber light that should have been beautiful but instead felt ominous. I parked behind the small library, which had already closed, and waited for full darkness, debating whether to follow Owen's instructions or flee to Wilson's Junction while I still could. Curiosity won out. It always did, much to my detriment. When night fell, I drove north as directed, locating the red mailbox that stood like a sentinel at the entrance to an overgrown dirt road. I killed my headlights and coasted down the path, parking behind a dense cluster of trees that would hide my car from the main road. The night air felt heavy with moisture and something else, anticipation, perhaps, or dread. Armed with only my camera, phone, and a small canister of pepper spray, I made my way deeper into the property on foot, guided by the beam of my flashlight. About a quarter-mile in, I spotted a small cabin with a single light glowing in the window. As I approached, the door opened, revealing Owen's silhouette. "You actually came," he said, sounding both relieved and terrified. "Hurry inside before they see you." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean, a single room with basic furniture and walls covered in newspaper clippings, maps, and photographs connected by red string. A conspiracy theorist's dream setup. Owen quickly closed the curtains and turned to face me, his expression grave. "This was my grandfather's hunting cabin," he explained. "The Nash family doesn't know it exists. It's not on any property records. Been in my family since before they took over." I moved closer to the wall of information, recognizing the symbols I'd photographed earlier among the clippings. "What is all this?" "The truth about Blackwood Creek," Owen said, his voice dropping to a whisper despite us being alone. "It started in 1908 when they built the dam to create the reservoir. The valley they flooded contained something the original settlers had tried to keep buried." He pointed to an old photograph showing stoic men in early 20th century, clothing standing before a deep pit. In the center lay what appeared to be a large stone sarcophagus covered in the same symbols I'd seen around town. My great-grandfather was part of the excavation team. He kept records they tried to destroy. Owen handed me a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. They called it the vessel. Inside was a body, not human, but something they couldn't identify. The flood was deliberate, meant to rebury what they'd found. "Who's they?" I asked, flipping through the journal filled with detailed drawings of the symbols and descriptions of strange occurrences. "Originally, the town elders. Now, the Nash family." Owen's hands trembled as he retrieved a more recent newspaper clipping. "Every generation, one family rises to protect the reservoir. They don't own it, it owns them." The clipping showed a family of 5, parents and 3 children, receiving a community service award 15 years ago. I recognized the patriarch as one of the men who'd collected Owen from the diner. "What happened to this family?" I asked, noting the hollow look in their eyes even in the photo. "They changed," Owen said simply. "Started acting strange, enforcing old traditions that had been mostly symbolic before. Then people began disappearing, outsiders at first, then locals who asked too many questions. His voice cracked. Like my parents 10 years ago. A sudden thud outside made us both freeze. Then another, rhythmic, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. Owen quickly doused the light, plunging us into darkness broken only by moonlight filtering through the curtains. They found us, he whispered, panic evident in his voice. But how? I was so careful. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Then came a sound that turned my blood to ice. Not knocking, but a slow, wet scratching, as if something with claws was testing the wood. Is there another way out? I breathed, barely audible. Owen pointed to a trapdoor in the floor partially hidden under a rug. Root cellar. Tunnel leads to the woods. My grandfather built it during Prohibition. We moved silently toward it as the scratching intensified. Just as Owen reached for the handle, a voice called out, not from outside, but impossibly from inside the room with us. Owen Nash, it said, using his last name I hadn't known until now. The voice was wrong, multiple tones layered over each other, like several people speaking in unison. You know better than to interfere. The chosen family must serve. I whirled around, pointing my flashlight toward the voice. In the corner stood the woman I'd seen on the road, still in the dirty white dress, still perfectly dry despite the light rain that had started outside. Up close, I could see what had bothered me about her face. It didn't move naturally, more like a mask someone was wearing. Owen yanked open the trapdoor. Run, don't look back. I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled down the ladder into a dirt cellar that smelled of damp earth and decay. Above us, the cabin door splintered open, followed by multiple sets of footsteps and that terrible multi-layered voice calling Owen's name. The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing us to move in a hunched position. Roots dangled from the ceiling, brushing against my face like skeletal fingers. Behind us, something entered the cellar, something that moved not with footsteps, but with a wet, sliding sound. They're not human anymore, Owen gasped as we ran. Not really. The vessel changes them, makes them vessels themselves. The tunnel seemed endless, winding beneath the earth in a disorienting pattern. Just when my lungs felt ready to burst, I saw a faint glow ahead, moonlight through the exit. We emerged gasping into a small clearing, the reservoir gleaming through the trees about 100 yards away. That was the wrong direction, Owen groaned, realization dawning on his face. The tunnel was supposed to lead away from the water. They've changed it somehow. A chorus of voices rose from the woods around us, that same unnatural layered sound, coming from every direction. Among the trees, I caught glimpses of movement, figures walking with jerky, disjointed motions, converging on our position. We have to reach the road, I said, pulling Owen toward what I hoped was north. My car isn't far. We ran through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces. The voices followed, never seeming to get closer or farther away, as if they were the forest itself speaking. Then Owen stumbled, crying out in pain. His ankle had caught in a root, twisted at an unnatural angle. Go, he urged, pushing me away. Get to Wilson's Junction. Find Sheriff Carver. He's not from here. Tell him everything. I'm not leaving you, I insisted, trying to help him up. You don't understand. Owen's face contorted with pain and fear. I'm already one of them. Have been since my parents disappeared. I've just been fighting it longer than most. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing skin that seemed to ripple and shift as if something moved beneath it. The water gets inside you, makes room for something else. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Owen, my only ally, was infected or possessed by whatever lurked in Blackwood Creek. Yet he'd fought against it, tried to warn me, potentially saving my life. The complex emotions must have shown on my face because his expression softened. I've been fighting it for years, he explained, his voice occasionally slipping into that layered quality before he seemed to force it back to normal. Most succumb within days. I wanted to expose them before I changed completely. Figures moved at the edge of the clearing now, townsfolk I recognized from the diner, but wrong somehow. They moved in perfect unison, faces expressionless, bodies occasionally jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Among them was Bethany the waitress, her severe bun now undone, hair floating around her head as if underwater despite the still night air. The journal, Owen pressed it into my hands. And this. He added a small metal object that looked like an ancient key, its design matching the symbols. The water isn't what you think. It's not a reservoir, it's a door. They come through when it opens. Who comes through? I whispered, backing away as the figures began slowly advancing. The original inhabitants. The ones who built the vessel. His voice was changing more frequently now, the human Owen fading. They want their world back. A new sound rose over the voices, a rhythmic chanting in a language I couldn't identify. The effect was immediate. Owen's body convulsed, his eyes rolling back to show only whites. "Run," he managed, his last human utterance before his jaw dislocated with a sickening crack, opening far wider than humanly possible. "They're calling me home." Terror gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I clutched the journal and key to my chest and sprinted into the darkness, away from the advancing figures. Behind me, Owen's screams transformed into something inhuman, a sound no human throat could produce. I crashed through underbrush, direction forgotten in my panic, branches scratching my face and arms. The voices followed, now joined by splashing sounds, as if the figures were moving through water despite us being on dry land. Every few seconds, I risked a glance backward. No flashlights pursued me, yet somehow they navigated the darkness perfectly. My foot caught on something, a root or stone, sending me tumbling down a steep embankment. I rolled helplessly, the world spinning around me until I slammed against the trunk of a massive oak. Pain shot through my ribs, but adrenaline kept it at bay as I scrambled to my feet. Through the trees ahead, I spotted what looked like a dirt road. Hope surged through me. If I could reach the road, maybe I could orient myself toward my car. I pushed forward, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the warm trickle of blood from a cut on my forehead. The road wasn't the one I'd driven in on. It was older, barely maintained, leading directly toward the reservoir. In either direction, dark figures moved with that same unnatural synchronicity, cutting off escape routes. The only clear path was toward the water, exactly where I didn't want to go. With no other options, I plunged into the underbrush again, paralleling the road at a distance. The sound of water grew louder, not just the gentle lapping of the reservoir, but something more powerful, like rushing rapids or a waterfall where none should exist. The trees thinned suddenly, revealing the reservoir stretching before me under the moonlight. What I saw made no sense. The placid surface I'd glimpsed earlier was gone. Instead, the water churned violently around a massive whirlpool at its center, the moonlight reflecting off its surface in impossible patterns that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Along the shore, dozens of townspeople stood in neat rows, arms raised in supplication toward the vortex. At their center, a stone altar had been erected, the same sarcophagus from the old photograph, somehow raised from the depths. On it lay a figure I couldn't make out clearly from this distance. Movement to my left caught my attention. A small boathouse partially collapsed with age, its door hanging open. It might offer temporary shelter, somewhere to hide until I could figure out how to circle back to my car. I dashed toward it, keeping low and using the tall grass as cover. Inside, the boathouse was little more than a shell, rotted boards, the remnants of old fishing equipment, and a small rowboat covered in years of dust. I crouched behind the boat, trying to control my breathing as I assessed my options. The journal was still clutched in my white-knuckled grip, along with the key Owen had given me. Curious despite my terror, I opened the journal to a random page, using my phone's screen for illumination. The neat handwriting detailed rituals performed at the reservoir throughout the town's history, sacrifices made to keep the door closed, to prevent them from returning to reclaim their world. According to the journal, the vessel wasn't a coffin but a mechanism, a lock that required periodic feeding to remain sealed. The original settlers had discovered it and unwittingly damaged the seal, allowing whatever lay inside to influence them, to establish a foothold in our world. The last pages contained Owen's grandfather's desperate plan, a counter-ritual that might close the door permanently, but required both the key and a willing sacrifice at precisely the right moment when the door was most vulnerable, during the calling ceremony that happened once every decade. Tonight, a sound from the boathouse entrance froze my blood, the wet, dragging footsteps I'd heard in the cabin. Something blocked the moonlight from the doorway, casting an elongated shadow across the dusty floor. The shadow was wrong. Too many limbs, moving in ways limbs shouldn't move. I pressed myself against the far wall, sliding toward a broken window that might offer escape. Outside, the chanting reached a crescendo, the whirlpool in the reservoir expanding, water climbing impossible heights as it spiraled into the sky. The figure in the doorway spoke, Bethany's voice layered with countless others. "We know you're here, photographer. Your kind always comes, always tries to expose what should remain hidden." A sound like laughter, but liquid and bubbling. "But tonight, you'll serve a greater purpose. The door requires a key and fresh blood." The window frame splintered easily as I crashed through it, glass shredding my jacket, but mostly sparing my skin. I hit the ground running, no destination in mind except away from the boathouse and the thing wearing Bethany's face. Behind me, that terrible bubbling laugh echoed across the water. The ritual at the shore had reached its peak. The whirlpool now extended impossibly high, forming a twisting column of water that seemed to tear a hole in the night sky itself. Through that rent in reality, I glimpsed something that my mind couldn't properly process. Geometries that shouldn't exist, colors outside the normal spectrum, movement that followed no natural laws. They were coming through. A realization struck me like lightning. The journal, the key, the ritual. If Owen's grandfather was right, I might be the only person who could close the door, but it would require getting to the altar, using the key, and a sacrifice. My own life, most likely. The thought of surrendering myself to whatever waited in that whirlpool made me physically ill. Yet the alternative seemed worse, allowing whatever these entities were to fully enter our world, to spread beyond Blackwood Creek. I thought of Owen, fighting their influence for years to warn someone, anyone who might stop this. I changed direction, moving parallel to the shoreline, searching for a way to approach the altar without being immediately captured. The townspeople remained focused on the vortex, their chanting growing more fervent as shapes began to coalesce within the water column, massive, shadowy forms pressing against the thinning barrier between worlds. A narrow peninsula extended into the reservoir, offering a pathway that would bring me within 50 yards of the altar. If I could swim the rest of the way, approaching from the water where they might not expect. It was a desperate plan, but the only one I had. I tucked the journal inside my water-resistant camera bag and held the key tightly as I made my way to the peninsula, keeping low among the reeds. The water's edge revealed another horror. It didn't behave like normal water. The surface rippled with what looked like thousands of tiny, writhing organisms, creating patterns that seemed almost like script. No time for hesitation. I slipped into the reservoir, fighting back a scream as the water, far colder than it should have been, enveloped me. Immediately, I felt pressure against my skin, as if the liquid itself was trying to push inside me through every pore. I kicked forward, staying as low as possible while still able to breathe. The sensation of invasion intensified with every stroke. My thoughts began to blur, foreign images and sensations intruding. Vast cities of non-Euclidean geometry, beings of light and sound moving through mediums that weren't air or water, but something else entirely. I was seeing their world, their memories, as they attempted to overwrite my consciousness. Fight it, I told myself, focusing on the altar growing closer with each desperate stroke. Just a little further. When I reached the base of the stone platform, my body felt only partially my own. My movements had become jerky and uncoordinated as two wills battled for control. I hauled myself from the water, the effort nearly impossible as my muscles alternately seized and relaxed against my commands. The figure on the altar came into terrible focus. Owen, his body grotesquely distorted, chest split open from throat to navel to reveal not organs, but a cavity filled with the same writhing organisms I'd seen in the water. His eyes remained human, however, wide with pain and silent pleading. The key burned in my hand, suddenly alive with energy. Somehow, I knew what to do, where it needed to be placed, what would happen when I turned it. The counter-ritual would reverse the flow, seal the breach, but require both the opener and the key to be sacrificed in the process. I dragged myself toward Owen, fighting for control of each movement. The townspeople hadn't noticed me yet, their focus entirely on the increasingly solid shapes emerging from the vortex. I reached Owen's side, my hand shaking violently as I raised the key. His eyes met mine, a moment of clarity and understanding passing between us. Then his hand, still partially human, closed around mine, helping guide the key toward the center of his exposed chest cavity. Together, he managed, his voice briefly his own again. The key slid into an invisible lock within him with a sound like ice cracking. As we turned it in unison, the world seemed to hold its breath. The chanting stopped, the whirlpool froze in place, and even the entities pressing through paused in their emergence. Then everything happened at once. The vortex collapsed inward with catastrophic force, sucking water, air, and light into its center. The pressure yanked me forward, my grip on the key the only thing keeping me from being immediately consumed. Owen's body began to disintegrate, breaking apart not into blood and tissue, but into those same strange organisms, which swirled around the key like metal filings around a magnet. The townspeople screamed, finally showing true emotion as their connections to whatever had controlled them were violently severed. Some collapsed, others clawed at their own skin as if trying to remove something burrowed inside them. The entities that had partially emerged were dragged back through the closing portal, their alien forms contorting in what might have been rage or pain. I held on to the key as long as I could, knowing that completing the ritual required my sacrifice as well. The pull was irresistible, lifting me off my feet toward the collapsing vortex. In those final moments, I had a choice: let go and potentially leave the door partially open, or follow through and ensure it closed completely. Images flashed through my mind: my apartment in Portland, my parents who would never know what happened to me, the documentary career I'd never have. Then Owen's sacrifice, his years of fighting against the invasion to give someone a chance to stop it. I let the current take me, still gripping the key as I was pulled toward the center of the maelstrom. The sensation was beyond description, being simultaneously stretched and compressed, torn apart and reconstructed. I glimpsed their world from the inside now, vast and ancient, beautiful and horrifying in equal measure, inhabited by consciousnesses so alien they perceived our reality as we might perceive a pencil sketch. Then something unexpected happened. As the portal contracted to its final point, a force I couldn't identify pushed back against the current, expelling me violently from the vortex. I was thrown clear of the altar, of the reservoir itself, landing brutally on the muddy shore as the water level plummeted. Where the whirlpool had been, only a perfectly circular hole remained in the reservoir bed, its edges smooth as glass, descending into darkness. For a moment, I thought I saw something move at its bottom, a massive eye blinking closed as the last connection between worlds severed. Then the earth shook, the ground around the reservoir cracking and collapsing inward. The altar, the hole, everything was being buried beneath tons of soil and rock as nature itself seemed to reject the unnatural portal. I crawled away from the shore on hands and knees, every movement agony, as the land behind me continued to collapse. I don't remember how I found my way back to my rental car. Hours must have passed, dawn breaking over a transformed landscape. Where the reservoir had been, only a massive sinkhole remained, surrounded by emergency vehicles and bewildered officials from neighboring counties. No one questioned me as I drove away from Blackwood Creek for the last time. In my rearview mirror, I watched ambulances loading survivors, blank-eyed townspeople who would likely never remember what they'd been part of, what they'd nearly unleashed. The journal was gone, lost in the reservoir. So was the key. But something remained inside me, knowledge I shouldn't have, memories that weren't my own, fractured glimpses of their world, their plans, their endless patience. They had waited millennia before, they would wait again. 3 days later, my van was repaired in Wilson's Junction. The mechanic mentioned how lucky I was to have missed that freak geological event in Blackwood Creek. I agreed politely, paid him, and got back on the road heading west, putting as much distance as possible between myself and Iowa. But distance doesn't matter to them. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I see that circular hole, that massive eye. And sometimes, in still water, a lake, a puddle, even my morning coffee, I catch glimpses of patterns forming, of tiny organisms arranging themselves into familiar symbols. They're still trying to reach through. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if closing that door was truly a victory, or if I simply prevented them from using Blackwood Creek as their entry point. There are other reservoirs, other lakes, other doors. And now, with whatever fragment of them still living inside me. I can feel when those doors begin to open. That's why I keep moving. Why my Instagram has gone quiet. Why I've traded documenting America's forgotten places for mapping its hidden dangers. There are other towns like Blackwood Creek out there. Other communities keeping ancient secrets. Other altars awaiting sacrifices. I don't know if I can stop them all. But thanks to Owen's sacrifice, and whatever force spared me in that final moment, I know how to recognize the signs. The symbols. The still waters that aren't quite right. And I know now what most people never learn. Some corners of America should remain forgotten. Some doors should stay closed. And some stories, like the truth about what happened in Blackwood Creek, Iowa, should never be told. At least, not until I find a way to make sure they can never come through again. I'm Aloan Carver, 29 years old, from Boise, Idaho. I'd been chasing the open road for 2 years, living off savings and odd jobs, parking wherever felt right. Tonight, that was a gravel pullout off Highway 218, just outside Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The cornfields stretched endlessly beyond my fogged-up windows, their stalks swaying like they were whispering secrets. I'd driven through a storm all day, and my bones ached for rest. The van, my home, nicknamed Drifter, was cozy, with a bed, a tiny stove, and fairy lights strung along the ceiling. But something about this place felt off, like the air was too heavy. I shook it off, blaming the weather. I brewed chamomile tea on my propane stove, the hiss of the burner cutting through the rain's rhythm. My phone had 1 bar, barely enough to check the map. Cedar Rapids was close, but this spot felt worlds away. I'd parked here because it was free, quiet, and hidden from passing cars. Vanlife taught me to trust my gut, but tonight, my gut was all over the place. Maybe it was the horror podcast I'd binged earlier, tales of hitchhikers and backroad killers. I laughed at myself, sipping tea, trying to ignore the prickle on my neck. I locked the doors, double-checked the curtains, and crawled into bed. The rain was louder now, almost angry. I told myself it was just nature doing its thing. As I lay there, the van creaked, settling into the gravel. I pulled my quilt tighter, thinking about tomorrow. I'd planned to hit a local diner, maybe find a laundromat. Vanlife wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Still, Iowa's flatness unnerved me. Back in Boise, the mountains felt protective. Here, the openness was exposed, like I was on display. I flicked on a battery-powered lantern, its glow casting soft shadows. My dog, Juniper, a scruffy mud I'd rescued in Nevada, slept at my feet. She was usually restless in new places, but tonight, she was out cold. That should have comforted me, but it didn't. The rain masked everything. Too much, maybe. I scrolled through my journal, a habit to calm my nerves. I'd written about the Badlands, the Oregon coast, the time I got stuck in a Utah canyon. Each entry grounded me, reminded me why I chose this life. But tonight, my pen hovered over the page. I jotted, Cedar Rapids pullout. Rainy. Weird vibe. My handwriting looked shaky, not like me. I blamed the cold seeping through the van's walls. I'd insulated Drifter myself, but Iowa's damp chill was a different beast. I zipped my hoodie, trying to focus on the journal. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cornstalks. It sounded alive, almost purposeful. Juniper stirred, her ears twitching. I froze, straining to hear what she did. The rain was too loud, swallowing any other sound. "You're fine, girl," I whispered, petting her. She settled, but her eyes stayed on the back door. I'd parked facing the road, the rear of the van toward the field. It was practical, easier to drive out if I needed to. But now, that field felt too close, too dark. I told myself I was being paranoid. Horror stories do that to you, right? Like when you watch a slasher flick and suddenly every creak is a killer. I forced a chuckle, but it sounded hollow. I turned off the lantern, plunging the van into darkness. The rain's rhythm should have lulled me to sleep, but my heart wouldn't slow. I thought about my friend Soren, who I'd met at a Vanlife meetup in Colorado. He'd warned me about rural spots like this, too isolated, too easy for trouble to find you. I'd brushed him off, called him dramatic. Now, I wished I'd listened. I checked my phone again, no signal now. Great. If something happened, I was on my own. I gripped my multi-tool, a gift from my dad before I left Boise. It wasn't much, but it felt solid. The van felt smaller, the walls closing in. I tried to focus on the rain, counting its beats like a metronome. 1, 2, 3, but something broke the pattern. A thud, faint but sharp, from the back of the van. My breath caught. Juniper's head snapped up, her growl low and guttural. It wasn't the wind or a branch, too deliberate, too heavy. I sat up, clutching the multi-tool, my pulse hammering. The rain kept falling, but that thud echoed in my mind, disturbing and real. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a raccoon, but deep down I knew better. Something was out there. I crept to the window, peeling back the curtain just a sliver. The cornfield was a black void, the rain blurring everything. My flashlight was in the glove box, but I didn't dare move. Juniper's growl grew louder, her body tense. I whispered her name, trying to calm us both. The air felt thick, charged with something scary I couldn't name. I thought about starting the van, driving away, but the keys were in the front, and I'd have to cross the open space to get there. My mind raced, replaying every horror movie I'd ever seen. None of them ended well for the person alone in the dark. I stayed frozen, listening. The rain was relentless, but no more thuds came. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was nothing. But Juniper's eyes were locked on the back door, and my gut screamed that we weren't alone. I wanted to believe it was just the storm playing tricks, but the feeling wouldn't shake. Something was out there, and it wasn't friendly. I held my breath, waiting, the multi-tool slick in my sweaty palm. The night stretched on, and every second felt like a countdown to something I couldn't predict. Juniper's growl was a low rumble, vibrating through the van's quiet. I clutched the multi-tool, my knuckles white, staring at the back door. The thud from earlier lingered in my head, heavy and disturbing. I told myself it was nothing, a branch, a critter, anything but what my imagination screamed. The rain pounded harder, like it was trying to drown out my thoughts. I needed to move, to do something, but my legs felt glued to the bed. Vanlife had taught me to handle breakdowns, flat tires, even sketchy gas stations, but this was new. I whispered to Juniper, "We're okay, girl," but my voice cracked. I wasn't convincing either of us. I forced myself to crawl to the driver's seat, keys jingling in my shaky hand. Starting the van and getting the hell out seemed smart, but the gravel pullout was narrow, and the rain had turned it to mud. I'd gotten stuck in Nevada once, axle deep in sand, and had to wait hours for a tow. If I got stuck here, with no signal, no help, I pushed the thought away. The dashboard clock glowed 1:17 a.m. I flicked on the interior light, scanning the van. Everything looked normal, my boots by the door, dishes in the sink, Juniper's water bowl. But the normalcy felt wrong, like a mask over something scary. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, its weight grounding me. I flicked it on, aiming the beam at the back window. The curtains blocked my view, and I hesitated. Peeling them back felt like inviting trouble. Instead, I checked the side windows, my breath fogging the glass. The cornfield was a dark blur, the stalks bending in the wind. I thought about calling someone, but my phone was still dead. Back in Boise, I'd always had my dad or my friend Mara to bail me out. Here, it was just me and Juniper, and that felt painfully small. A new sound cut through the rain, a scrape, slow and deliberate, along the van's side. My heart lurched. Juniper barked, sharp and loud, making me jump. I hissed, "Quiet," but she kept barking, her eyes fixed on the driver's side. The scrape stopped, then started again, closer to the front. It wasn't the wind. This was metal on metal, like someone dragging a tool. My mind flashed to a true crime show I'd watched, about a guy who targeted campers, luring them out with noises. I gripped the flashlight, my pulse racing. I wasn't falling for that. I weighed my options. Stay put, hope it was nothing, or drive and risk getting stuck. Neither felt right. I remembered Soren's advice. If it feels off, move. But moving meant exposing myself, and the van's engine wasn't exactly quiet. I cursed myself for parking so deep in the pullout. Backing up would be a nightmare. Juniper's barking grew frantic, and I shushed her again, my voice sharper than I meant. She whimpered, and guilt hit me. She was scared too. I stroked her head, whispering, "I'm sorry, girl." The scrape came again, closer now, near the front tire. I made a decision. Check the outside from inside. No opening doors. I climbed to the passenger seat, flashlight in one hand, multi-tool in the other. The side mirror was my best bet. I angled it, trying to catch a glimpse without sticking my head out. The rain streaked the glass, blurring everything. For a second, I thought I saw movement, something tall, shifting in the corn. My stomach dropped. I blinked and it was gone. Just stalks, I told myself. But the horror of that moment clung to me, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I sat back, heart hammering, trying to think. Maybe it was a local, messing with me. Iowa wasn't exactly known for crime, but every place had its weirdos. I'd met a guy in Wyoming once, drunk and banging on my van at 3 a.m., thinking it was his buddies. I talked him down, no harm done. This felt different, though, calculated, not drunk. The scrape hadn't come again, but the silence was worse. It was like whatever was out there was waiting, watching. I checked the locks again, my hands clumsy. The van felt like a trap now, not a home. Juniper whined, pressing against me. I hugged her, her warmth steadying me. I needed a plan. Driving was risky, but staying felt like waiting for something bad to happen. I thought about the multi-tool, sharp enough to do damage, but against what? My mind spun with possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. I remembered a Vanlife blog I'd read, about a woman who'd parked in a remote spot and woke to find her tires slashed. She'd barely made it out. I checked my keys, ready to bolt if I had to, but the thought of leaving the van's safety made my skin crawl. The rain slowed, just enough to hear something new, a faint crunch, like boots on gravel, coming from the back. My blood ran cold. Juniper's ears perked, her body rigid. I clicked off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness, hoping it'd make us less visible. The crunch came again, closer, deliberate. Someone was circling the van, and they weren't trying to hide it. I held my breath, every nerve screaming that something scary was about to go down. The night wasn't just a storm anymore. It was a threat, and I was right in its crosshairs. Darkness swallowed the van, my flashlight off, my breath shallow. The crunch of gravel stopped, but that made it worse, like whoever was out there knew I was listening. Juniper pressed against me, her body trembling. I gripped the multi-tool, its edges biting into my palm. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the silence was thick, disturbing, like the calm before a scream. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some local kids screwing around, but my gut said this was something scarier. I'd parked in dozens of remote spots, Montana, Arizona, you name it, and never felt this kind of dread. Something was wrong, and it was close. I inched toward the driver's seat, keys in hand, ready to start the van and floor it. But a new sound froze me, a low, guttural hum, almost human, coming from the cornfield. It wasn't singing, not exactly, but it had a rhythm, like a chant. My skin prickled. I thought of a documentary I'd seen about cults, how they'd hide in rural places, doing God knows what. Iowa seemed too normal for that, but that hum was real, and it was getting louder. Juniper whined, her ears flat. I shushed her, my voice barely a whisper, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought it'd give me away. I risked a glance at the side mirror, angling it toward the field. The drizzle caught my flashlight's reflection, and for a split second, I saw them. Figures, at least 3, standing just beyond the corn's edge. Tall, motionless, their outlines blurry but human. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a prank. The horror of it hit me like a punch. I was alone, miles from help, with people watching me. I ducked low, praying they hadn't seen me. The hum continued, steady, like they were calling something or someone. I clutched Juniper, her warmth the only thing keeping me from losing it. My mind raced. Were they locals? Drifters? Something worse? I remembered a news story from Oregon about a group that lured travelers off highways, robbing them, sometimes worse. The details were fuzzy, but the fear wasn't. I checked my phone again, still no signal. The van's walls felt paper thin, like those figures could rip through them. I thought about honking the horn, maybe scaring them off, but that'd draw more attention. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. Starting the van was my only shot, but the engine's roar would be a dead giveaway. A new noise, metal clanking, close to the back door. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the scrape from before. This was heavier, like someone testing the handle. Juniper growled, low and fierce, but I clamped her muzzle, whispering, "No, no, please." The clank came again, then a thud, like a fist on the door. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. The hum from the field stopped, and the silence was worse, heavy with intent. I pictured those figures moving closer, their faces hidden, their hands carrying who knows what. The terror was real now, no longer just a feeling but a thing I could taste. I crawled to the back, staying low, and peeked through a gap in the curtain. My flashlight was off, but the moon broke through the clouds, casting a sickly glow. I saw one of them, tall, wearing a hooded coat, standing maybe 10 feet from the van. He didn't move, just faced the door like he knew I was watching. My heart stopped. His hood hid his face, but his stillness was unnatural, disturbing, like a predator waiting for prey to bolt. I pulled back, my breath hitching. Juniper sensed it too, her body rigid, ready to fight or flee. I had to think fast. The van was my fortress, but it wouldn't hold forever. I remembered a trick from a Vanlife forum. If you're cornered, make noise inside. Make it seem like you're not alone. I grabbed a pot and banged it against the sink, yelling, "Hey, get out here," like I was calling someone. My voice sounded weak, but I kept it up, hoping it'd spook them. The clanking stopped, and for a moment, I thought it worked. But then the hum started again, closer, joined by more voices. My stunt hadn't scared them, it had drawn them in. The horror sank deeper. They weren't leaving. I slid back to the driver's seat, keys ready, my mind screaming to run. But another sound stopped me, a soft tap on the driver's side window, inches from my head. I didn't look. I couldn't. Juniper's growl turned into a snarl, and I knew if I turned, I'd see something scary, something I'd never unsee. The tap came again, slow, deliberate, like a taunt. My hands froze on the keys. Starting the van now would light me up, make me a target. But staying meant facing whatever was out there, and I wasn't ready for that. The tapping grew insistent, joined by a low chuckle, human, but wrong, like it came from a throat that didn't laugh often. My chest tightened, the air too thick to breathe. The figures in the field, the hooded man, the noises, they weren't random. They were coordinated, hunting me. I thought of every mistake I'd made. Parking here, ignoring my gut, not checking the area before dark. The terror was overwhelming, a living thing wrapping around me. Something was clearly wrong, and it was closing in, step by step, tap by tap. The chuckle outside the window snapped something in me. I jammed the keys into the ignition, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped them. Juniper snarled, her teeth bared, as the tapping on the glass turned to a bang, hard, deliberate, like they wanted in. I twisted the key, and Drifter's engine roared to life, shattering the night's quiet. The headlights blazed, catching the hooded figure by the van. His face was still hidden, but he raised a hand, holding something metal that glinted. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was it, run or die. I threw the van into gear, the tires spinning in the muddy gravel. The horror of those figures closing in was all I could think about. The van lurched forward, sliding in the muck. I gripped the wheel, praying I wouldn't get stuck. Behind me, shouts erupted. Human voices, angry, too close. I glanced in the side mirror and saw them. 3, maybe 4 figures, running from the cornfield, their shapes distorted in the rain. One swung something, a bat, maybe a pipe. It hit the back door with a sickening crunch, and Juniper yelped. I floored the gas, the van fishtailing onto Highway 218. My mind screamed, "Go, go, go!" But the road was slick, and the tires squealed. Every second felt like a gamble, with something scary chasing me down. I didn't dare look back long. The headlights cut through the drizzle, but the darkness seemed to swallow the road ahead. I remembered a rest stop a few miles north. Lights, maybe people. If I could get there, I'd be safe. But the rearview mirror showed headlights now, faint but gaining. They weren't giving up. My stomach churned. I'd read about road rage incidents, like that couple in California chased for miles by a trucker. This was worse, deliberate, disturbing, like they wanted more than to scare me. I pushed Drifter harder, the engine groaning. Juniper huddled in the passenger seat, her eyes wide. I reached over, stroking her, muttering, "We're okay, girl." It was a lie. The van speedometer hit 70, way too fast for these wet roads, but slowing down wasn't an option. A sign flashed by, Cedar Rapids, 8 miles. I could make it, but a loud bang from the back made me swerve. Something had hit the van again, hard enough to dent the frame. I pictured the back door caving in, those figures climbing inside. The terror was a vice around my chest, squeezing tighter with every mile. The headlights behind me were closer now, their high beams blinding in the mirrors. I swerved again, trying to shake them, but Drifter wasn't built for this. The van rocked, my dishes clattering in the sink. I thought about my multi-tool, still in my pocket, but what good was it against a car full of them? I needed a plan. I remembered a trick from a Vanlife meetup. If you're followed, head for a public place, somewhere bright. The rest stop was my best shot, but the headlights were so close I could hear their engine now, a low growl over the rain. A sudden jolt threw me forward. They'd rammed me. The van skidded, tires screaming, and I fought to keep it on the road. Juniper barked, scrambling to stay put. My hands were slick with sweat, the wheels slipping. Another hit came, lighter but enough to make the van shudder. They were toying with me, like cats with a mouse. The horror of it sank in. They didn't just want to scare me. They wanted me off the road, somewhere they could get me. I screamed, "Leave me alone!" But the words were swallowed by the engine's roar. I saw the rest stops glow ahead, a faint beacon in the dark. My chest loosened for a split second. Safety, maybe. But the car behind me swerved into the next lane, pulling alongside. I glimpsed the driver, a shadowed face under a hood, staring right at me. My blood ran cold. He jerked his wheel, trying to force me off the road. I yanked mine the other way, the van tilting dangerously. Gravel sprayed as I hit the shoulder, but I corrected just in time. The rest stop was close, but so were they, and every second was a life-or-death dance. I floored it, the van shaking like it might fall apart. The car matched my speed, their bumper inches from mine. I thought of every mistake that led here, parking in that pullout, ignoring the thud, not leaving sooner. The rest stop's lights grew brighter, and I could see a truck parked there, maybe a guard. Hope flickered, but then a third hit came, the hardest yet. The van spun, the world blurring, and I screamed as we veered toward the ditch. I fought the wheel, Juniper's barks echoing, the terror overwhelming as the lights of safety slipped away. I managed to stop the spin, the van skidding to a halt half off the road. The car slowed, its headlights pinning me like a spotlight. I was panting, my vision blurry with panic. The rest stop was so close, but they were closer. I heard a door slam, theirs, and footsteps on the gravel. My hands fumbled with the keys, the engine still running. I had one chance to get out of this, but the figures were coming, their shadows long and scary in the headlights. I gripped the wheel, ready to ram my way to safety, knowing this was it. Run now or never. The van's engine growled, my foot hovering over the gas. Footsteps crunched closer, and a voice called out, low, guttural, saying my name. Aloan. My blood froze. How did they know? I hadn't told anyone where I was, not even Soren. The horror of it hit like a wave. They'd been watching me longer than tonight. I slammed the gas, the van lurching back onto the road. The rest stop was 100 yards away, its lights my only hope. But the car roared behind me, and I heard a crack, like a gunshot. The back window shattered, glass spraying the van. Juniper yelped, and I screamed, ducking low. I swerved toward the rest stop, the van's tires screeching. The truck I'd seen was still there, and a figure stood by it. Maybe help. I leaned on the horn, the blare cutting through the night. The car behind me didn't stop, but their headlights veered slightly, like my noise had spooked them. I thought of a story Mara told me, about a woman who escaped a kidnapper by making a scene. I kept honking, praying the trucker would notice. Glass crunched under my boots, and I realized Juniper was bleeding, a shard in her paw. Guilt stabbed me, but I couldn't stop, not now. The rest stop's lot was empty except for the truck. I skidded to a stop near it, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. Still no signal, but I dialed 911 anyway, hoping it'd catch something. The car had slowed, idling at the lot's edge, their headlights glaring. I saw the trucker now, a burly guy in a flannel, staring my way. I waved frantically, yelling, "Help!" He started toward me, but then another crack rang out, and he dropped, clutching his leg. My stomach plummeted. These weren't just hunters, they were armed, and they didn't care who got hurt. I locked the doors, my mind spinning. The trucker was crawling toward his cab, blood staining the pavement. I wanted to help, but opening the door meant risking everything. The car crept closer, and I saw two figures get out, hoods up, moving like they had all the time in the world. The terror was suffocating. I thought of my dad, how he'd taught me to fight, to never give up. I grabbed the multi-tool, knowing it was useless against guns, but it was all I had. Juniper whimpered, licking her paw, and I whispered, "I'm sorry, girl." I'd failed her. My biggest mistake was thinking I could wait them out. I should have kept driving, found a town, anything but stopping. I glanced at the trucker. He'd reached his cab, maybe calling for help. Hope flickered, but then one of the figures raised a rifle, aiming at my van. I ducked, pulling Juniper down, as another shot tore through the windshield. Glass rained over us, and I felt a sting on my arm, blood, warm and sticky. The pain was sharp, but the fear was worse, a disturbing certainty that I wasn't getting out of this. I made a split-second choice, run for the truck. It was stupid, reckless, but staying in the van was a death sentence. I scooped Juniper, ignoring her whine, and kicked open the driver's door. The air was cold, the drizzle soaking me as I sprinted, my boots slipping on the wet pavement. Shots rang out, one grazing my shoulder, the burn like fire. I reached the truck, yanking the door open. The trucker was inside, pale, clutching a radio. "Get in," he gasped. I shoved Juniper inside, climbing after her, but a hand grabbed my ankle, yanking me back. I screamed, kicking wildly, the horror of their grip like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The trucker lunged, swinging a tire iron at the figure. It connected with a sickening crunch, and the grip loosened. I scrambled into the cab, slamming the door. The trucker floored it, the rig lurching forward, tires squealing. The figures fired again, bullets pinging off the truck's frame. I held Juniper, her blood mixing with mine, my vision blurry with tears. We roared out of the lot, the car's headlights fading behind us. The trucker muttered, "Cops are coming," but his voice was weak, his hands shaky. I looked at my arm, the wound deep, my head light. The terror hadn't left, it was part of me now. We made it to a gas station 10 miles away, red and blue lights flashing as cops swarmed us. The trucker collapsed, medics rushing to him. I sat on a gurney, Juniper bandaged beside me, my arm stitched but throbbing. The cops said they'd found the car abandoned, no sign of the figures. They asked questions, but I barely heard them. I kept hearing my name in that guttural voice, seeing those hooded faces. The horror lingered, a scar deeper than the one on my arm. I'd escaped, but at what cost? The trucker might not make it, and Drifter was gone, my home riddled with bullets. I'd made a deadly mistake, stopping at that rest stop, thinking it was safe. It cost me everything. Juniper nuzzled me, her eyes tired but alive, and I clung to her, the only piece of my life left. The cops offered a motel, but I couldn't imagine sleeping, not with those figures still out there, maybe watching. The tragedy wasn't just the van or the blood, it was knowing I'd never feel safe again. Vanlife was my freedom, but Iowa turned it into a nightmare, and that disturbing truth would follow me forever. Dusk settled over the Iowa skyline, painting the horizon blood orange. I'm Thane Morrow, 32 years old, from Missoula, Montana. I've been living in my converted Ford Transit van, Wanderer, for 3 years, chasing freedom and odd jobs across the country. Tonight, I parked in a secluded lot near Dubuque, Iowa, just off Highway 20, tucked behind a shuttered gas station. The lot was overgrown with weeds, and a rusted sign creaked in the breeze. I'd driven all day from Chicago, my eyes gritty, needing a quiet spot to crash. Wanderer's interior, with paneling, a fold-out bed, a propane stove, felt like home, but this place had a weird edge, like it was watching me. I cracked a window, letting the cool air slip in, and fired up my stove to heat some chili. The smell filled the van, grounding me. Dubuque was a stone's throw away, but this lot felt cut off, like it belonged to another world. I'd found it on a Vanlife app, listed as a safe overnight spot, but safe didn't mean cozy. The gas station's windows were boarded, and a chain-link fence sagged nearby, half buried in tall grass. I told myself it was fine, privacy was the point of Vanlife. Still, my neck prickled, a feeling I couldn't shake, like something disturbing was brewing. My cat, Sable, a black rescue with one green eye, curled up on the bed, purring. She was my road buddy, always calm, even in sketchy spots. I envied her chill. I checked my phone. 2 bars, enough to text my sister, Lila, back in Missoula. Dubuque tonight. All good. I typed, but hesitated before sending. The lot's quiet was too deep, the kind that swallows sound. I'd parked in remote places before, Wyoming deserts, Oregon forests, but Iowa's flatness felt exposed, like I was a bug on a windshield. I hit send anyway, trying to ignore the unease. I spooned chili into a bowl, the steam warming my hands. The van's battery-powered lamp cast a soft glow, making shadows dance on the walls. I'd built Wanderer myself, every inch a labor of love, from the solar panels to the hidden storage. It was my escape from a dead-end job and a life that felt too small. But tonight, that freedom tasted bitter. I kept glancing at the windows, their blackout curtains drawn tight. Vanlife rule: always cover the glass. You never know who's looking. The thought was paranoid, but horror movies taught me paranoia saves lives. Sable's ears twitched, her head lifting. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. The breeze had died, but something rustled outside. Not leaves, but heavier, like fabric brushing grass. My pulse quickened. I set the bowl down, grabbing my flashlight from the counter. It was probably a raccoon, I told myself, like that time in Colorado when one tried to claw through my trash. But Sable's stare was locked on the side door, her pupils wide. I whispered, "What is it, girl?" But she didn't move. The rustle came again, closer, and my gut said this wasn't an animal. I clicked off the lamp, plunging the van into darkness. My eyes adjusted, catching faint moonlight through the curtain's edge. I crept to the driver's seat, flashlight off, listening. The lot was silent again, but that rustle stuck with me, scary in its vagueness. I thought about my buddy Cass, a vanlifer I'd met in Arizona. He'd warned me about weird vibes in rural spots, places where locals didn't take kindly to strangers. I'd laughed it off, called him a worrier. Now, I wished I'd paid attention. My phone buzzed, Lila's reply: "Stay safe." Too late for that. I checked the locks, a habit that felt urgent tonight. Wanderer's doors were solid, but the side door had a finicky latch I'd meant to fix. I pressed my hand against it, making sure it held. The rustle hadn't returned, but the air felt charged, like before a storm. I thought about starting the van, finding a Walmart lot in Dubuque, but moving meant stepping outside to check the tires, a van life must after parking on rough ground. The idea of leaving the van's safety made my skin crawl. I gripped the flashlight, its weight a small comfort, and told myself I was overreacting. Sable jumped to the counter, her tail flicking. She hissed, low and sharp, at the back window. My heart skipped. I'd parked with the rear facing the gas station, thinking it'd shield me from the highway. Now, that choice felt like a trap. I inched toward the back, my breath shallow, and nudged the curtain aside. The boarded-up station loomed, its silhouette jagged against the sky. Nothing moved, but the darkness was too thick, hiding something disturbing. I remembered a true crime podcast about a guy who stalked rest stops, waiting for solo travelers. My mind was running wild, but I couldn't stop it. I sat back, flashlight in one hand, my pocket knife in the other. Sable stayed tense, her hiss a warning I couldn't ignore. The lot was still, but I felt eyes on me, like I was being studied. I wanted to laugh it off, blame the chili or the long drive, but the horror was real, settling in my bones. Something was out there, and it wasn't just my imagination. I held my breath, waiting for the next sound, knowing whatever came would change everything. Sable's hiss cut through the van's silence like a blade. I gripped my pocket knife, my heart thumping, staring at the back curtain where she was fixated. The rustle I'd heard earlier hadn't returned, but the air felt wrong, heavy with something scary. I whispered, "Easy, girl." But Sable didn't budge, her one green eye glowing in the dark. I'd parked in rough spots before, deserts, mountains, but this lot near Dubuque was different. The abandoned gas station loomed too close, its boarded windows like blind eyes. I wanted to start Wanderer and bolt, but the thought of driving blind into the night stopped me cold. I crept to the driver's seat, keeping low, and checked my phone. 1 bar now, barely enough to call for help if things went south. I thought about texting Lila again, but what would I say? Weird noises, freaking out. She'd tell me to chill, like she did when I panicked over a flat tire in Idaho. I set the phone down, grabbing my flashlight instead. Its beam was strong, but using it meant lighting up the van, maybe drawing attention. The horror of being seen was real. Van life taught me to stay invisible. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the switch. A new sound froze me, a faint tap, like a pebble hitting the van's side. My breath caught. Sable growled, her tail puffing up. The tap came again, then another, rhythmic, like someone tossing stones to test me. My mind flashed to a story cast told at a Vanlife meetup. A guy in Texas had rocks thrown at his rig by locals who hated nomads. He'd left fast, no harm done. This didn't feel like that. These taps were deliberate, disturbing, like a game I didn't understand. I clutched the knife, its blade too small to feel safe. I had to decide, stay put or check outside. Staying felt safer, but if someone was messing with Wanderer, I needed to know. Flat tires, cut fuel lines. I'd read horror stories on Vanlife forums about vandals targeting rigs. I cursed myself for parking here, trusting that app's safe label. The lot was too isolated, the gas station too creepy. I thought about the side door's wonky latch. If someone tried it, it might give. I slid to the door, pressing my shoulder against it, my pulse racing. The taps stopped, but the silence was worse, like whatever was out there was listening back. Sable jumped to the bed, her growl louder now. I hissed, quiet, but she wasn't having it. Her claws dug into the blanket, her body tense. I followed her gaze to the front windshield, where the curtains gapped just enough to show the lot. My flashlight was off, but moonlight caught something, a flicker of movement near the fence. My stomach dropped. It was too tall for an animal, too quick for the wind. I squinted, praying it was a trick of the light, but the shape moved again, closer, slipping behind the gas station. The terror of being watched sank in, cold and sharp. I weighed my options. Driving away was tempting, but I hadn't checked the tires, and the lot's gravel was uneven, perfect for getting stuck. I'd spun out in Montana once, stuck for hours until a farmer pulled me out. Here, there'd be no one. I could wait it out, hope they got bored, but that felt like waiting for something worse. I remembered Lila's advice. Trust your gut, Thane. My gut was screaming to move, but fear glued me in place. I fumbled with my phone, typing a quick SOS to Lila, but it wouldn't send. The signal was gone. Another tap hit the van, this time on the back door. Sable yowled, and I nearly dropped the knife. It wasn't a pebble, too heavy, like a fist or a tool. My mind spun with possibilities, each one scarier than the last. Were they trying to break in? Scare me out? I thought about banging on the walls, making noise to seem tough, but that might provoke them. I crept to the back, my hands shaky, and checked the lock. It held, but the door rattled slightly, like someone was testing it. The horror of how thin that metal was hit me hard. I needed a plan, fast. I grabbed my tire iron from under the bed, heavier than the knife, better for a fight. The idea of fighting anyone was nuts. I'm a carpenter, not a brawler, but I wasn't going down easy. I thought about the gas station. Maybe I could run there, hide inside. But that meant leaving Sable and Wanderer my whole life. The tap stopped again, and I held my breath, waiting. Then, a new sound, a low whistle, human, coming from the fence line. It was sharp, intentional, like a signal. My blood ran cold. This wasn't one person. The whistle came again, answered by another from the gas station's far side. My chest tightened. There were at least two of them, maybe more, circling the van. Sable's growls turned to whimpers, and I pulled her close, her warmth steadying me. The lot wasn't just a bad choice. It was a trap, and I'd driven right into it. The disturbing truth settled in. They weren't here by chance. They'd been waiting, and I was their target. I gripped the tire iron, my mind racing for a way out, knowing whatever came next would be worse. The second whistle sliced through the night, sharp and close, like a blade against my nerves. I clutched the tire iron, my knuckles white, as Sable pressed against me, her whimpers soft but frantic. The van's walls felt thinner, the darkness outside thicker, hiding something scary. Those whistles weren't random. They were signals, coordinated, and I was the target. My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. I'd parked in sketchy spots before, but this lot off Highway 20 in Dubuque was a nightmare unfolding. The gas station's silhouette loomed, and I knew the horror was real now, not just a bad vibe. I crouched low, peering through the windshield's curtain gap. The moonlight was faint, but I caught movement. Two figures, low and quick, darting from the fence to the gas station's corner. They weren't kids or drunks. Their movements were too precise, like hunters. My stomach twisted. I remembered a news story Lila sent me about a robbery ring targeting RVs in rural towns. They'd cut power, slash tires, then swarm. This felt like that, but worse, more disturbing, like they wanted more than my stuff. Sable's claws dug into my leg, grounding me. A loud bang hit the back door, making the van shake. I bit back a yell, my grip tightening on the tire iron. Sable hissed, her fur bristling. The bang came again, harder, like someone swinging a hammer. The lock held, but the door groaned, and I pictured it buckling. My mind raced. Were they trying to break in or force me out? I thought about yelling, pretending I wasn't alone, but my voice felt trapped. The terror was suffocating, like the air itself was against me. I glanced at my phone. No signal, no lifeline. I was alone, and they knew it. I crawled to the driver's seat, keys in my pocket, ready to bolt. But another sound stopped me, a low, raspy voice right outside the side door. "Come on out, friend," it said, slow and mocking. My blood froze. The voice was human, but wrong, like it enjoyed my fear. Sable growled, and I clamped her mouth shut, whispering, "No." Another voice laughed, softer, from the back. There were at least three now, circling Wanderer like wolves. The horror of their confidence hit me. They weren't scared of being caught. This was their turf. The side door's latch rattled, someone tugging it. I lunged, slamming my weight against it, my shoulder aching. The rattling stopped, but the raspy voice chuckled. "Got spirit, huh?" My skin crawled. I thought of a true crime podcast about a trucker ambushed at a rest stop, beaten for fun by a gang. These guys sounded like that, thrill seekers, but darker, more disturbing. I checked the other locks, my hands clumsy. The van was my fortress, but it felt like a cage, trapping me with their voices and bangs. A new noise, metal scraping under the van, like they were messing with the chassis. My heart sank. They were sabotaging Wanderer, maybe cutting the fuel line or worse. I remembered Cass's story about a Vanlifer waking to slash tires, stranded until dawn. I couldn't let that happen. I grabbed my flashlight, debating whether to shine it outside. It had exposed me, but I needed to see. I flicked it on, aiming through the back window's curtain gap. The beam caught a face, pale, grinning, eyes glinting like coins. I gasped, dropping the light. The image burned into my brain. The scraping stopped, replaced by footsteps crunching gravel, fast and heavy, toward the front. They'd seen the light, knew I was awake. My mistake was using it, giving them a target. I cursed myself, my hands shaking as I grabbed the keys. Starting the van was my only shot, but the engine would draw them like moths. The raspy voice called again, closer. "No running, friend." A loud crack hit the windshield, spiderwebbing the glass. Sable yowled, and I ducked, glass dust stinging my face. The terror was a living thing now, clawing at me. I slid to the floor, tire iron in one hand, keys in the other. The footsteps circled, deliberate, like they were savoring this. A new sound, something dragging, heavy, maybe a chain or pipe. My mind spun with images, blood, broken metal, Sable hurt. I thought of Lila, how she'd begged me to get a gun. I'd laughed, said I didn't need one. Now, I'd give anything for it. The van rocked as something slammed the side, hard enough to dent it. The horror of their strength was clear. They could tear Wanderer apart if they wanted. The raspy voice sang now, a tuneless hum, joined by others, like a twisted hymn. It came from all sides, closing in. Sable trembled, her eyes locked on the door. I realized something was clearly wrong. Not just a robbery or prank, but something planned, something they'd done before. The disturbing truth hit me. I wasn't random. They'd chosen this lot, this night, for me. I gripped the keys, my mind screaming to run, but the voices, the bangs, the dragging sound, they were everywhere, and I was out of time. The van rocked again, a deafening bang against the side door, and I knew I couldn't wait anymore. I scrambled to the driver's seat, keys shaking in my hand, Sable yowling behind me. The raspy voice outside laughed. "Gonna run, friend?" As another crack split the windshield wider. I jammed the key in, and Wanderer's engine roared, headlights flaring. The beams caught them. 3 figures, hooded, one swinging a chain that glinted like a snake. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was it, get out or die. I threw the van into gear, tires spinning on the gravel. The horror of their grins burned into my eyes. The van lurched forward, skidding toward Highway 20. A heavy thud hit the back, like they'd thrown something, and Sable hissed, scrambling under the bed. I floored the gas, the lot's weeds whipping the undercarriage. In the rear view, I saw them running, not chasing but moving with purpose, like they knew the terrain. My mind flashed to a movie I'd seen. where a guy escaped a gang only to be cornered later. This felt scarier, more real, their movements too calm, too sure. The highway was empty, but the darkness swallowed my headlights, making every curve a gamble. I pushed Wanderer to 65, the engine whining, the cracked windshield blurring the road. I needed a town, lights, people. Dubuque was close, maybe 10 minutes. But a new sound made my blood run cold, an engine revving behind me. Headlights flared in the mirrors, gaining fast. They had a truck, big and black, its grill like teeth. My stomach dropped. I'd read about road chases in Vanlife horror stories, where rigs were run off cliffs. This was that nightmare, alive and closing in. I gripped the wheel, praying the tires were intact. The truck rammed my bumper, jolting the van. I swerved, dishes crashing in the sink, Sable's yowl piercing the chaos. "Hold on, girl," I shouted, my voice raw. Another hit came, harder, and the van fishtailed, gravel spraying as I hit the shoulder. I corrected, barely, my hands slick with sweat. A sign flashed by, Dubuque, 6 miles. I could make it if I didn't crash. The truck's horn blared, mocking, and I saw the driver's silhouette, leaning forward, like this was fun. The terror of their joy was worse than the chase itself. I remembered a trick Cass taught me, zigzag to throw off a tail. I swerved left, then right, the van groaning, but the truck stayed glued to me, its bumper kissing mine. A loud crack rang out, a gunshot. The side mirror exploded, shards flying. I ducked, heart pounding, the horror of their weapons sinking in. They weren't just chasing, they were hunting. Sable was silent now, hidden, and I hoped she was safe. I thought of Lila, how she'd never forgive me if I didn't make it. I pushed the van harder, the engine screaming. Lights appeared ahead, Dubuque's outskirts, a gas station glowing like a beacon. Hope flickered, but the truck rammed me again, the hardest yet. The van spun, tires screeching, and I fought the wheel, my arms burning. We skidded across the lane, stopping inches from a ditch. The truck slowed, its headlights pinning me. I heard doors slam, footsteps crunching, and that raspy voice. "Told you, no running." My chest tightened. The gas station was so close, but they were closer, their shadows long and scary in the glare. I restarted the engine, the van coughing but alive. I floored it, aiming for the gas station, its neon sign my lifeline. The truck roared after me, but I saw a police cruiser parked at the lot's edge. My heart leapt. Help, maybe. I leaned on the horn, the blare desperate, and swerved into the lot, skidding to a stop. The truck slowed, then peeled off, its taillights vanishing. I panted, hands shaking, Sable creeping out, her eye wide. The cop was inside, and I waved frantically, but the horror lingered. They'd let me go, but why? I stumbled out, tire iron in hand, yelling for the cop. He ran over, radio crackling, his face all business. "What's going on?" he asked, eyeing the van's dents and shattered glass. I spilled everything. The lot, the figures, the chase. He nodded, calling for backup, but his eyes scanned the dark, like he knew something I didn't. Sable clung to me, her fur matted. The gas station's light felt safe, but my gut screamed it wasn't over. Those figures weren't gone. They were waiting, and I'd walked right into their game. The cop told me to stay put, said they'd searched the lot by the gas station. I locked myself in Wanderer, Sable on my lap, my pulse still racing. The van was a mess, glass everywhere, a dented door, maybe worse underneath. I thought of every choice that led here. Picking that lot, not checking the area, ignoring Sable's hisses. The terror hadn't left. It was part of me now, a shadow that moved with me. I watched the cop's flashlight bob in the distance, praying he'd find them, knowing deep down this wasn't the end. The gas station's fluorescent buzz was the only sound as I sat in Wanderer, Sable curled tight against me. The cop had been gone 10 minutes, his cruiser still parked, radio silent. I kept my eyes on the lot's edge, where the darkness seemed to pulse, hiding something disturbing. My phone had one bar, and I texted Lila. In Dubuque, trouble, safe for now. It sent, barely. I wanted to believe the cop would handle it, but that raspy voice echoed in my head. No running. The horror of their confidence gnawed at me. They'd let me reach the station, like they knew I'd stop. I checked the van's locks, my hands still shaky. Sable's eye was fixed on the side door, her body tense. I whispered, "We're okay, girl," but it felt like a lie. The cop's flashlight hadn't returned, and the lot was too quiet. I thought of a story Cass told, about a vanlifer who thought he'd escaped a creep, only to find him waiting at the next stop. My mistake was thinking the gas station was safe, that they'd give up. I grabbed the tire iron, my pocket knife in my boot, ready for anything, but the fear was a weight I couldn't shake. A faint tap on the back door made my heart stop. Sable growled, low and fierce. I froze, listening. Another tap, then a scrape, like metal on metal. My blood ran cold. They were here. I crawled to the back, peering through the curtain's edge. The lot was empty, but a shadow moved near the gas pump, quick and human. The cop was nowhere, his cruiser dark. The terror hit me. They'd gotten to him, and I was next. I thought of Lila, how she'd begged me to stay home. I'd chosen this life, and now it was killing me. I slid to the driver's seat, keys ready, but a loud bang rocked the van, the side door denting inward. Sable yowled, and I yelled, "Get away!" Knowing it was useless. The raspy voice laughed outside. "Thought you'd hide, friend." Another bang, and the door's latch groaned, giving way. My deadly mistake was stopping here, thinking lights meant safety. I started the engine, but a hand smashed through the cracked windshield, grabbing my arm. I swung the tire iron, connecting with bone, and the hand pulled back with a curse. I floored the gas, the van lurching toward the highway. The figure stumbled, but others appeared, running from the shadows, one with a shotgun. A blast tore through the back door, shredding the wood paneling. Sable screamed, and I saw blood. Hers, mine, I couldn't tell. My arm burned, the grab leaving a gash. I swerved onto Highway 20, the van rattling, something grinding underneath. The gas station faded, but headlights flared behind me. Their truck, back for round two. The horror was relentless, a noose tightening around me. I pushed Wanderer past its limit, the engine screaming, Dubuque's lights blurring by. A police station was close. I'd seen a sign earlier. If I could get there, I'd live. But the truck rammed me, the van skidding, my vision swimming. Sable was limp now, her blood soaking my lap. Tears stung my eyes, but I couldn't stop. Another shot rang out, and the van jerked, tire blown. I fought the wheel, the van veering into a guardrail with a sickening crunch. The impact threw me forward, pain exploding in my chest. The truck stopped, doors slamming. I fumbled for the tire iron, my hands slick with blood. Sable wasn't moving, and that broke me more than the pain. Footsteps crunched closer, the raspy voice singing that tuneless hum. I'd failed her, failed myself. My final mistake was thinking I could outrun them. The police station was a mile away, but it might as well have been 100. A shadow loomed at the driver's window, the shotgun's barrel glinting. I swung the iron, weak and desperate, but a hand grabbed my wrist, twisting until I dropped it. The door yanked open, and they dragged me out, my boots scraping asphalt. I screamed, kicking, but they were too strong, their faces hidden under hoods, eyes gleaming with something disturbing. The raspy one leaned close, his breath hot. Should have stayed in Montana. A blow to my head sent stars bursting, and I fell, the world fading. I thought of Sable, her one green eye, my van, my life, gone in a night. The tragedy wasn't just my death, it was the freedom I'd loved, twisted into a nightmare by Iowa's dark. They left me there, blood pooling, the van a wreck beside me. Cops found me at dawn, barely breathing, Sable dead in the wreckage. I lived, but only just stitches, scars, a broken ribcage. The truck was gone, no trace, like ghosts. The police called it a random attack, but I knew better. They'd hunted me, planned it, and won. Wanderer was scrapped, my van life dream buried with Sable. The horror stayed, a shadow I'd carry forever, a reminder that some roads lead only to loss. The Iowa sky was a bruise of purple and gray as I pulled into a dirt lot off Highway 151, just outside Iowa City. I'm Callista Wren, 27 years old, from Eugene, Oregon. For 2 years, I've called my converted Chevy Express van Haven home, chasing gigs as a freelance photographer across the states. This lot, bordered by a crumbling barn and a field of wild grass, was supposed to be a quick stop for the night. I'd been driving since dawn, my eyes heavy, needing rest. Haven's cozy setup, bunk bed, solar lights, a tiny fridge, felt safe, but something about this place made my skin prickle, like I'd stumbled into somewhere I didn't belong. I fired up my kettle for tea, the soft hiss calming my nerves. Iowa City was a few miles away, but this spot felt like nowhere, too quiet, too still. I'd found it on a Vanlife map, marked as low-key, free, but low-key was starting to feel creepy. The barn's sagging roof cast jagged shadows, and the grass swayed despite no wind. I told myself it was just fatigue talking. I'd pulled all-nighters before, no big deal. But my hands shook as I poured chamomile, the steam doing little to ease the disturbing vibe creeping in. My parrot, Zephyr, a gray African rescue, squawked from his perch by the bed. He was my road companion, always chatty, but tonight he was subdued, his feathers ruffled. I scratched his head, murmuring, "What's up, buddy?" But he just clicked his beak, eyes darting to the side window. I followed his gaze, my stomach tightening. The curtains were drawn, but a faint glow, maybe moonlight, seeped through. I'd parked Haven facing the highway for a quick exit, the barn at my back. Now, that barn felt too close, like it was leaning in. I sipped my tea, trying to shake the unease. Haven was my sanctuary, built with my own hands, every shelf, every wire. I'd left Eugene to escape a life that felt like a cage, and Vanlife gave me wings. But tonight, those wings felt clipped. I checked my phone. One bar, enough to text my friend Jude in Oregon. Iowa City, parked for the night. I sent, adding a smiley to fake calm. The lot's silence was oppressive, like it was holding its breath. I thought of a horror flick I'd watched, about a camper stalked in the woods. My laugh was forced, but it didn't help. Zephyr squawked again, sharper, his wings flapping. I set my mug down, grabbing my flashlight from the counter. Its beam was strong, but I kept it off, not wanting to light up Haven like a beacon. Vanlife rule: stay dark, stay hidden. I'd learned that in Nevada, when some drunk banged on my door at 2 a.m., he'd wandered off, harmless, but this felt different, scarier. The grass outside rustled, a soft shush that wasn't the wind. My pulse quickened. I told myself it was a deer, but Zephyr's stare said otherwise. I checked the locks, my fingers brushing the deadbolt I'd installed myself. Haven's doors were solid, but the back window had a small crack from a rock in Colorado. I taped it, but now it felt like a weak spot. The rustle came again, closer, near the barn. I froze, listening, my tea forgotten. Zephyr muttered, "Bad, bad," a phrase he'd picked up from me. I shushed him, my voice barely a whisper, but his words echoed in my head. The horror of the unknown was settling in, making every shadow feel alive. I crept to the driver's seat, flashlight in one hand, my multi-tool in the other. It wasn't much, but its weight was better than nothing. I thought about Jude, who'd warned me about rural stops. "People get weird when you're not one of them," he'd said. I'd rolled my eyes, called him paranoid. Now, I wished I'd listened. The rustle stopped, but a new sound took its place. A low thump, like something heavy shifting in the barn. My heart skipped. It wasn't an animal. It was too deliberate, too human. I nudged the side curtain, just a sliver, peering into the dark. The barn was a black shape, its doorway a deeper void. Nothing moved, but the air felt charged, like before a lightning strike. I remembered a true crime show about a drifter who hid in abandoned buildings, watching travelers before striking. My mind was spiraling, but I couldn't stop it. I checked my phone again. No reply from Jude, signal gone. The lot was a trap, and I'd parked right in it. Zephyr's beak clicked, a warning, and I knew something disturbing was out there, waiting. I sat back, multi-tool clutched tight, my breath shallow. Zephyr stayed tense, his eyes on the back window. The thump didn't come again, but the silence was worse, like a predator holding its breath. I wanted to start Haven and drive to Iowa City, find a Walmart lot, but leaving Mint checking the tires, and the idea of stepping outside made my gut churn. The horror was real now, a weight in my chest, telling me I wasn't alone. I held Zephyr close, his feathers soft but trembling, and braced for whatever came next. Zephyr's beak clicked, his eyes locked on the back window, and I felt the air in Haven grow tighter. That thump from the barn lingered in my mind, heavy and wrong, like a warning I couldn't ignore. I gripped my multi-tool, its edges sharp against my palm, and crouched by the driver's seat, listening. The lot outside Iowa City was dead quiet now, but that made it scarier, like something was holding its breath. I'd parked in remote spots before, Oregon coasts, Utah canyons, but this dirt patch by the crumbling barn felt like a mistake. My gut screamed to leave, but the dark beyond my curtains kept me frozen. I checked my phone again. No signal, no reply from Jude. The one bar I'd had was gone, leaving me cut off. I thought about starting Haven, driving to Iowa City's lights, but the tires worried me. The lot was rough, full of rocks, and I hadn't checked them when I parked. I'd gotten a flat in Arizona once, stranded until a tow truck showed up at dawn. If I got stuck here, with no help, I'd be a sitting duck. The horror of that thought was real, clawing at me, making every choice feel like a trap. A new sound broke the silence, a soft scrape, like boots on dirt, near the van's side. Zephyr squawked, "Bad, bad," his voice low but urgent. My heart jumped. I hissed, "Quiet, buddy," but he flapped his wings, feathers brushing my arm. The scrape came again, slow, circling toward the back. It wasn't an animal, too steady, too human. My mind flashed to a Vanlife blog I'd read, about a woman who heard noises and found her van's battery cables cut. I clutched the multi-tool, picturing someone out there, messing with Haven, waiting for me to slip up. I had to decide, stay put or risk a look. Staying felt safer, but if they were tampering with the van, I needed to know. The back window's crack made it vulnerable, and the barn was too close, a perfect hideout. I cursed myself for picking this lot, trusting that app's safe tag. Jude's warning echoed. Rural spots can turn ugly fast. I'd brushed him off, said I could handle it. Now, I wasn't so sure. The scrape stopped, but Zephyr's stare didn't waver, his claws digging into the bed. The disturbing vibe was thicker, like the night itself was against me. I grabbed my flashlight, keeping it off, and crept to the side door. Its lock was sturdy, but I pressed my shoulder against it, just in case. The scrape hadn't returned, but a faint clink, like metal on metal, came from the barn. My stomach dropped. It sounded like tools, maybe a chain, something heavy. I thought of a true crime show about a guy who lured campers with noises, then struck when they investigated. I wasn't falling for that, but doing nothing felt like waiting for the horror to come to me. I needed a plan, and fast. I considered banging on the walls, making noise to scare them off, like I'd done with a coyote in Nevada. But this wasn't a coyote. The clink came again, sharper, followed by a low murmur, voices too quiet to make out. My blood ran cold. There was more than one, and they were close, maybe in the barn. Zephyr muttered, "No, no," and I pulled him close, his warmth steadying me. The terror of being outnumbered hit hard. I could start the van, but the engine's roar would give me away, and if the tires were damaged, I'd be stuck. I slid to the back, my hands shaky, and checked the windows tape. It held, but the crack seemed wider, like someone had pried at it. My breath hitched. Had they been that close while I was making tea? I thought about the multi-tool, sharp enough to cut, but useless against a group. I needed to see what I was up against. I nudged the curtain, just a sliver, and peeked at the barn. The doorway was black, but a faint light flickered inside, like a phone screen or a lighter. The horror of that light was worse than the dark. It meant someone was there, planning. The murmur grew louder, words still unclear but angry, like an argument. I caught Van and now, and my chest tightened. They were talking about me. I backed away, my mind racing. Driving was risky, but staying was worse. I remembered a trick from a Vanlife meetup. If you're cornered, flash your lights. Make it seem like you're alert. I flicked Haven's interior lights on and off, hoping it'd spook them. The voices stopped, and for a moment, I thought it worked. But then a loud bang hit the barn's wall, echoing across the lot, and Zephyr screamed, his wings thrashing. The bang was followed by footsteps, heavy, fast, coming from the barn toward the van. My pulse spiked, the multi-tool slick in my sweaty hand. Zephyr's screams filled Haven, and I shushed him, my voice cracking. The footsteps slowed, circling the van, deliberate, like they were sizing me up. A new clink, metal again, closer, near the back. The disturbing truth sank in. They weren't just messing around. They wanted in, and they weren't leaving until they got what they came for. I gripped the keys, my mind screaming to run, but the footsteps were everywhere, closing the trap. Footsteps crunched closer, circling Haven like a noose tightening. I clutched the multi-tool, my heart hammering, Zephyr's screams echoing in the van. The bang from the barn and that clink of metal weren't accidents. They were signals, and I was the prey. The lot outside Iowa City felt like a grave now, the barn's dark shape looming in my mind. I'd faced creepy nights before, rattling winds, stray animals. But this was different, scarier, like the air itself was poisoned with intent. I whispered to Zephyr, "We're okay," but my voice shook, and his wide eyes told me he knew better. I crouched by the driver's seat, keys in my pocket, ready to bolt, but a new sound stopped me, a low, guttural laugh, right outside the side door. It was human, but twisted, like it fed on my fear. "Pretty Van," a voice rasped, slow and deliberate. My blood froze. Zephyr squawked, "No, no," and I clamped his beak, my hands trembling. Another voice joined, softer, from the back, "She's in there." She. They knew I was alone, a woman, and that horror sank deep, like a blade in my gut. I wasn't just a target, I was personal. The side door rattled, someone tugging the handle hard. I lunged, pressing my body against it, my shoulder aching as the lock strained. The raspy voice chuckled, "Got fight, huh?" My stomach churned. I thought of a true crime podcast Jude loved, about a gang that stalked solo travelers, targeting women for sport. These voices had that vibe, calculated, disturbing, like they'd done this before. I checked the back window's tape. It was peeling, the crack wider. They'd been at it, and I hadn't noticed. My mistake was brewing tea, acting like this lot was safe. A loud thud hit the back door, the van rocking. Zephyr flapped, his cage rattling, and I hissed, "Quiet," but my own fear was louder. The thud came again, heavier, like a crowbar or worse. The lock held, but the metal groaned, and I pictured it giving way. My mind raced. Were they breaking in or trying to scare me out? I remembered a Vanlife tip. If you're trapped, make noise, fake a crowd. I grabbed a pot and banged it on the sink, yelling, "Get out here now," like I had backup. The thud stopped, but the laugh returned, colder, like my trick was a joke. I peeked through the side curtain's gap, my flashlight off, moonlight barely enough to see. Two figures stood by the barn, tall and hooded, one holding something long. A pipe, maybe. A third moved near the van's back, his shadow flickering. My chest tightened. 3 against 1, maybe more. The horror of their numbers was overwhelming, like a pack closing in. I thought about Iowa City, its lights so close yet useless. My phone was dead, no signal, no Jude, number 911. Haven was my only shield, and it was failing. A scraping sound started under the van, metal on metal, like they were cutting something. My heart sank. Tires, fuel line, anything to trap me. I'd read about vandals slashing rigs to strand vanlifers, leaving them for worse. I crawled to the driver's seat, keys ready, but a new voice, closer, at the windshield, muttered, "Lights on." My blood ran cold. I'd left the solar lamp on, its faint glow leaking through the curtains. I flicked it off, but too late. A fist slammed the windshield, cracking the glass, and Zephyr screamed, his wings thrashing. They'd seen me, and now they were coming. I slid to the floor, multi-tool in one hand, flashlight in the other, debating a desperate move. I could flash the headlights, maybe spook them, but that'd light me up too. The scraping stopped, replaced by footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling tighter. The raspy voice sang, "No place to go," joined by a hum from another, like a sick lullaby. My skin crawled. I thought of every mistake. Parking here, ignoring Zephyr's squawks, not checking the lot. The terror was a living thing, wrapping around me, and I knew they weren't just thieves. They wanted me. A loud clank hit the back window, the tape splitting, glass crunching. I gasped, pulling Zephyr's cage close, his feathers soft but trembling. The crack was wide now, a hand could reach through. I pictured those hooded figures, their pipes and grins, tearing Haven apart. The voices grew louder, arguing, now or wait. And I realized they were planning, savoring this. The disturbing truth hit. This wasn't random. They'd chosen this lot, knew I'd stop here. I gripped the keys, my mind screaming to run, but the footsteps were everywhere, and something was clearly wrong. The raspy voice called, "Come out, sweetheart," and a pipe tapped the side door, rhythmic, taunting. Zephyr's cage shook as he flapped, his squawks deafening. I covered him, whispering, "Please, buddy," but my own panic was louder. The tapping grew harder, denting the metal, and I knew the door wouldn't hold long. The horror was suffocating, Every sound a countdown to something I couldn't face. I had one shot, start the van or fight, but the voices, the clanks, the footsteps were closing in, and I was out of time. The pipe's tap on the side door turned into a slam, metal screeching as the lock buckled. I scrambled to the driver's seat, keys shaking in my hand. Zephyr's squawks filling Haven. "Come out, sweetheart," the raspy voice taunted, followed by a laugh that made my skin crawl. I jammed the key in, and the van's engine roared, headlights slicing through the dark. The beams caught them, 3 hooded figures, one swinging a crowbar, another with a knife glinting. My heart pounded, the horror of their faces, grinning, fearless, pushing me to move. I threw Haven into gear, tires spinning in the dirt, praying I'd make it out. The van lurched toward Highway 151, gravel flying, the barn's shadow shrinking behind me. A heavy thud hit the back door, like they'd thrown something, and Zephyr's cage rattled, his wings thrashing. I floored the gas, the lot's rough ground shaking Haven's frame. In the rear view, I saw them running, not chasing but fanning out, like they knew the roads better than me. My mind flashed to a true crime show about a gang that herded victims into traps. This felt scarier, more real, their movements too precise. The highway was dark, Iowa City's lights my only hope. I pushed Haven to 70, the engine groaning, the cracked windshield blurring the road. A sign read Iowa City for miles, so close, but every second was a gamble. Headlights flared in my mirrors, a pickup truck, its grille menacing, gaining fast. My stomach dropped. I'd read Vanlife horror stories about chases ending in ditches, bodies never found. This was that nightmare, alive and roaring behind me. I gripped the wheel. Zephyr squawks quieter now, like he sensed the danger. The truck's horn blared, a mocking scream, and I knew they weren't letting me go. The truck rammed my bumper, jolting Haven forward. I swerved, my mug shattering on the floor, Zephyr's cage sliding. "Hang on, buddy," I yelled, my voice raw. Another hit came, harder, and the van fishtailed, tires screeching on the asphalt. I corrected, barely, my hands slick with sweat. I thought of Jude, how he'd taught me to drive in snow, saying, "Stay calm, Cal." Calm was gone now, replaced by terror. The truck's headlights were blinding, and I saw the driver's silhouette, leaning forward, like this was a game. Their joy was the most disturbing part. I tried a trick Jude swore by, we've to throw them off. I jerked the wheel left, then right, Haven groaning, but the truck stayed glued, its bumper kissing mine. A loud crack rang out, a gunshot. The back window shattered, glass spraying, and Zephyr screamed, his cage rattling. I ducked, heart racing, the horror of their weapons sinking in. They weren't just chasing, they were hunting, and I was running out of road. Iowa City's lights grew closer, a gas station glowing ahead. If I could reach it, I might live. The truck rammed again, the hardest yet, and Haven skidded, scraping a guardrail. Sparks flew, and I fought the wheel, my arms burning. Zephyr was silent now, hidden in his cage, and I prayed he was okay. The gas station was 100 yards away, its neon sign a lifeline. I leaned on the horn, the blare desperate, hoping someone would hear. The truck slowed, but didn't stop, its headlights still pinning me. I saw a figure in the lot, a clerk, maybe, and waved frantically, screaming, "Help." The truck's horn mocked me, but I kept going, the station so close. I skidded into the gas station lot, tires squealing, and stopped near the pumps. The truck slowed, idling at the lot's edge, its headlights glaring. I locked the doors, grabbing my multi-tool, Zephyr's cage pulled close. The clerk, a young guy, ran out, phone in hand, yelling, "What's wrong?" I spilled everything. The barn, the figures, the chase. He nodded, dialing 911, but his eyes kept darting to the truck, still there, waiting. The horror hadn't ended. It was pausing, like they knew I wasn't safe yet. I held Zephyr's cage, his feathers still, and braced for what came next. The clerk said cops were coming, told me to stay in the van. I checked Zephyr. He was alive, but blood matted his wing, a glass shard stuck in it. Guilt stabbed me. I'd failed him. The truck's engine revved, then cut off, its lights dimming. My pulse raced. They were out there, maybe circling, planning. The gas station's lights felt flimsy, like a spotlight on a stage I couldn't leave. I thought of every choice that led here. Picking that lot, ignoring the thump, staying too long. The terror was a shadow, moving with me. and I knew this wasn't over. Cops screeched into the lot, red and blue lights flashing, and I exhaled, hope flickering. The truck was gone, vanished into the dark. An officer approached, asking questions, but I barely heard him, my eyes on Zephyr, my hands shaking. Haven was a mess, glass everywhere, dents, a busted window. The cops searched the lot, found nothing, but their faces were grim, like they'd seen this before. The horror lingered, a weight in my chest, telling me those figures weren't done. I clutched Zephyr's cage, knowing safety was a lie, and waited for the night to strike again. The gas station's hum was all I heard as I sat in Haven, Zephyr's cage on my lap, his wing bandaged by a cop with a first aid kit. The officers were outside, radios crackling, but the lot felt too quiet, like the calm before a storm. I'd texted Jude, safe, Iowa City, attacked, but got no reply. My signal was spotty. The truck was gone, the cops said, but that raspy voice, pretty Van, echoed in my head. The horror of their knowledge, their planning, clung to me. I'd thought the gas station was my salvation, but my gut screamed I'd made a deadly mistake. I checked Haven's locks, my hands still trembling. Zephyr muttered, bad, bad, his voice weak, and I stroked his feathers, whispering, I'm sorry, buddy. The cops were patrolling, but one kept glancing at the barn's direction, like he knew something. I thought of a true crime show about a town where locals covered for criminals, letting them hunt travelers. Iowa City seemed too normal for that, but the terror was real, and I couldn't shake the feeling those figures were close, watching. My multi-tool was in my pocket, useless against what I'd seen. A faint tap on the side door made my heart stop. Zephyr squawked, his cage shaking. I froze, listening, the tap coming again, soft but deliberate. The cops were across the lot, too far. I crawled to the door, peering through the curtain's gap. A shadow moved near the pumps, hooded, holding something long, a pipe, like before. My blood ran cold. They'd followed me, waited for the cops to spread out. The horror hit. The gas station wasn't safe. It was their next stage. I'd stopped here, thinking lights meant protection, and that was my fatal error. I grabbed the keys, ready to drive, but a loud bang rocked the van, the side door denting inward. Zephyr screamed, and I yelled, leave us alone. The raspy voice laughed, no hiding, sweetheart. Another bang, and the lock snapped, the door creaking open. I swung my multi-tool, slicing air, but a hand grabbed my wrist, yanking me forward. I kicked, screaming, but another figure appeared, crowbar raised. The cops shouted, running back, but a gunshot cracked, and one fell, clutching his arm. The terror was suffocating. They didn't care who they hurt. I broke free, scrambling to the driver's seat, Zephyr's cage sliding. The engine roared, but the second figure smashed the windshield, glass raining. I floored the gas, Haven lurching toward the highway, the figures diving aside. More shots rang out, one hitting the side, metal screeching. Zephyr's squawk stopped, and I saw his cage, blood, feathers, his body limp. My scream tore through me, pain worse than the glass cutting my hands. I'd failed him, my companion, my heart. The cops' sirens wailed, but the figures vanished into the dark, like ghosts. I pushed Haven onto Highway 151, the van shaking, something grinding underneath. Iowa City's police station was close. I'd seen it on the map. If I could get there, I'd live. But headlights flared behind me. Their truck, back, its grille gleaming. My vision blurred with tears, Zephyr's blood on my lap. Another shot hit the van, the rear tire blowing. Haven swerved, crashing into a ditch, the impact slamming my head against the wheel. Pain exploded, and I heard the truck stop, doors slamming, that raspy laugh closing in. They dragged me out, my body limp, the multi-tool gone. The raspy one knelt, his hood hiding all but his grin, saying, wrong night, sweetheart. I thought of Jude, my photos, Zephyr's squawks, my life, slipping away. A blow to my chest stole my breath, and I fell, the ditch's mud cold against my skin. The cops' sirens were distant, too late. My deadly mistake was stopping at that gas station, believing I'd escaped. The tragedy wasn't just my blood in the dirt, it was Zephyr, Haven, my freedom, all lost till I was dark. I woke in a hospital, tubes in my arms, a cop by my bed. I'd live, they said, but my ribs were cracked, my arms slashed, my spirit broken. Zephyr was gone, Haven totaled, my camera smashed in the wreck. The figures vanished, no trace, the truck a ghost. The cops called it a random attack, but I knew they'd planned it, hunted me from that lot to the ditch. The horror stayed, a scar deeper than the stitches, a reminder that Vanlife's freedom came with a price I'd paid in blood. I'd never drive again, never chase the horizon. Jude flew in, held my hand, but I saw Zephyr's cage in every shadow. The barn, the voices, the crowbar, they haunted me, a nightmare I'd carry forever. Iowa City's lights had lied, offering safety that didn't sock. The tragedy was losing everything to a night I couldn't outrun, a lesson carved in loss. Some roads lead only to death.